He invented a girlfriend to survive his family. She invented a reason to stay just to test him. For 3 months, they lied to everyone around them, and somehow ended up telling each other the truth. He was a single father with calloused hands and a daughter who still set an extra plate at dinner. She was worth $4 billion and hadn't cried in 6 years. One impulsive lie at a vineyard wedding was all it took. And by the time the world tried to tear them apart, neither of them could remember what life felt like before the other one was in it. If you've ever chosen the wrong moment to be honest, stay with me. This one's for you. Hit that like button, drop a comment with the city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The invitation had arrived 3 weeks ago, slipped under Ethan's door by his mother in the particular way she had of delivering things she knew he didn't want, quietly, without knocking, like if she moved fast enough he wouldn't have time to object. Marcus and Claire, June 14th, Silverbell Estate Winery, Napa Valley. Black tie. He'd set it on the kitchen counter and ignored it for 4 days. Then Lily had found it and held it up with both hands like she'd discovered treasure. "Daddy, it's a fancy party," she'd said, studying the gold-embossed lettering with the seriousness only an 8-year-old can bring to something she doesn't fully understand. "Are we going?" And that was it. He couldn't say no to her face. So here he was, standing at the edge of a Napa Valley vineyard in a suit he hadn't worn since his wife's funeral, watching 200 people celebrate love in the golden afternoon light, and feeling like he was watching it through glass. The ceremony had been beautiful. Of course it had. Marcus was his cousin, the good-looking one, the one who always landed on his feet. And Claire was the kind of woman who made everything she touched look intentional. They'd written their own vows. People had cried. Ethan had stood in the third row with Lily pressed against his side, her small hand wrapped around 2 of his fingers, and he'd managed to keep his face neutral through all of it. That was the thing people didn't tell you about grief that was 3 years old. It didn't knock you down anymore. It just sat behind your sternum like a stone you'd learned to carry, and sometimes, in moments like this, you felt the full weight of it shifting. The reception was now in full swing. Ethan stood near the edge of the property where the manicured lawn gave way to actual vineyard rows, wild and structured at the same time, the kind of agricultural order he respected, and nursed a glass of wine he hadn't asked for. Lily was somewhere near the dessert table with his sister Dana, which meant he had approximately 11 minutes before someone in his family found him and started a conversation he didn't want to have. He got 4. "Ethan." His mother appeared at his elbow with the efficiency of someone who had been tracking him. Margaret Mercer was 61, sharp-eyed, still pretty in a way that photographs underestimated, and she was smiling at him with the specific smile she used when she was about to say something he wouldn't like. "You look thin." "I look fine, Mom." "You look like a man who's been eating sandwiches over a sink." He had, in fact, eaten a sandwich over a sink that morning, but he wasn't going to give her that. "I'm good. The ranch is doing well. Lily's doing well." "Lily needs a mother." There it was, faster than usual. She must have been holding it all day. "Lily has me," he said, keeping his voice even. "That's not the same thing, and you know it." Margaret touched his arm, and to her credit, her voice was genuinely gentle. She wasn't being cruel. She never was. That was almost the harder thing to deal with. 3 years, sweetheart. Sarah would not have wanted this for you." "Mom." He said it quietly, the way you say a word when you're using it as a door. She heard it, backed off a half step. "I just worry." "I know you do. Your Aunt Patricia is here with her friend's daughter. She's lovely, works in finance." "Mom." "And she's not looking for anything serious. She just—" "I have someone," Ethan said. The words left his mouth before he'd made any decision to say them. He heard them the same way his mother did, slightly delayed, floating in the warm June air between them. Margaret blinked. "You what?" "I've been seeing someone." He kept his expression neutral through what felt like tremendous effort. We're keeping it quiet. It's still early." His mother stared at him. Her expression cycled through about 4 different things in the span of 2 seconds. "Why haven't you said anything?" "Because I didn't want the whole family knowing before I was ready." "Does Dana know?" "Nobody knows. That's what keeping it quiet means." Margaret pressed her lips together. He could see her recalibrating. Then, with a brightness that made his stomach drop slightly, she said, "Well, she should have come tonight. We'd love to meet her." She couldn't make it. He'd said it too fast. He could feel it. She had a thing, a work thing, on a Saturday. "She's in tech," he said, which was both completely improvised and oddly specific, and he had no idea why he'd added it. "She works a lot." His mother studied him with the expression she'd been using on him since he was 9 years old and trying to explain why the neighbor's fence was broken. Then she smiled again, different this time, more determined. "Then bring her to Sunday dinner," she said. "2 weeks from now. Nothing formal, just family." Before he could find the exit from that sentence, she was already walking away toward a cluster of aunts, and he could tell from the angle of her shoulders that she was already telling them. He turned back to the vineyard and drank most of his wine in one go. Perfect, he thought. Absolutely perfect. He spent the next 20 minutes avoiding his family with the focused energy of a man navigating a minefield, but the Mercer family was large and the estate was not large enough. And eventually his Uncle Roy found him near the bar and slapped him on the shoulder hard enough to slosh his drink. "Your mother says you've been hiding a woman," Roy said, delighted, because Roy was the kind of man who found everything delightful. "Good man. Always good to have secrets." "It's not a secret, it's just Margaret told Patricia. Patricia told your cousin Deb. Deb told Claire's mother, so I'd say it's pretty much public at this point." Roy grinned at him. "Bring her around. We won't bite. Much." 20 minutes after Roy, Dana found him. His sister was 4 years younger than him and had always possessed a radar specifically calibrated for when he was in trouble. She came at him from the direction of the dessert table with Lily skipping alongside her and a knowing look that he didn't like at all. "So," Dana said, "don't." "Mom is thrilled. I know." Aunt Patricia cried a little. "Dana." "Who is she?" Dana lowered her voice so Lily, now distracted by a butterfly near the flower arrangements, wouldn't hear. "And don't say someone in tech again because I already heard it secondhand and it sounded fake when it came from Mom. It's complicated." "That's a non-answer. That's the answer I have." Dana studied him with the direct, slightly exhausted look that younger sisters develop after years of watching their older brothers make questionable decisions. "You made her up," she said. "I didn't. Ethan, I did not make her up." This was technically accurate. He was going to need to find a real person. "I just haven't introduced her to anyone yet. Mom wants her at Sunday dinner in 2 weeks." "I know." "Ethan," Dana said, and now her voice had that note in it, not quite pity, not quite exasperation, somewhere in between. "If you needed an excuse to stop Mom from setting you up, you could have just said you weren't ready. That doesn't work. You know that doesn't work. I've said I'm not ready for 3 years, and she still had Aunt Patricia bring a woman to Thanksgiving." Dana winced. That had been bad. "Fair point. I just needed them to stop. For one night." He looked out across the reception, the tables and flowers, and the ease of all these people who weren't carrying the specific weight he was carrying. "I'll figure it out." He figured he had a week before his mother started calling daily, maybe 10 days. He was wrong. He had about 14 minutes, because that was when Aunt Patricia appeared from the direction of the main tent, moving with purpose, and beside her, smiling in the way of a person who has been freshly briefed and is now eager to be helpful, was a woman named Brenda who worked in finance and was apparently lovely. Ethan did the only thing available to a man who has told a lie he cannot immediately correct. He walked in the opposite direction. Specifically, he walked toward the far edge of the property, past the ceremony chairs being folded by catering staff, past the koi pond that the estate apparently considered a feature, and out toward the section of vineyard where the grape rows started and the reception noise became a murmur. He pulled out his phone and thought seriously about calling Dana to rescue him, but Dana would tell him he'd made his bed. He was standing between 2 rows of Cabernet vines, phone in hand, trying to figure out his next move when he noticed the woman. She was standing maybe 30 feet away, at the end of a vineyard row, facing away from him. She had a glass of champagne that she wasn't drinking, held loose in one hand at her side, and she was looking out across the hills with the particular stillness of someone who is very good at being alone in public. She was wearing a midnight blue dress that was simple enough to be understated and clearly expensive enough to announce itself anyway. Her dark hair was pulled back from her face, Her posture was straight without being stiff. She wasn't part of his family. He would have remembered her. She was also critically nowhere near Aunt Patricia and Brenda from finance. Ethan stood there for a moment, doing something he would later be embarrassed by, running a quick calculation in his head. She was alone. She appeared to be attending the same wedding, which meant she had some social context he could use. She looked like someone who was already trying to avoid something, which meant she might be sympathetic to a stranger who was also trying to avoid something. And then, underneath all of that, was a simpler and more honest thing. She was the most striking woman he'd seen in a long time, and he'd noticed her before he'd started calculating anything. And he was going to have to live with that. He walked over. She heard him when he was about 10 feet away. He saw her shoulders shift slightly, but she didn't turn around until he was close enough that not turning around would have been deliberate. When she did turn, it was with the measured ease of someone who was used to people approaching her and had decided long ago how to handle it. Her eyes were dark, assessing, the kind of eyes that took inventory quickly. She looked at him the way people look at a piece of information they haven't decided what to do with yet. "Hi," he said. "Hi," she said. "I'm sorry to bother you. I can see This is going to sound insane." One of her eyebrows moved very slightly upward. "Try me." He looked back toward the tent. Aunt Patricia was at the edge of it, scanning the reception. He had maybe 90 seconds. "My family thinks I have a girlfriend," he said. "I don't have a girlfriend. I panicked and told my mother I was seeing someone, and now my entire extended family knows. And my aunt is headed in this direction with a woman she's been trying to set me up with for 8 months. I am asking you, and you can absolutely say no. I want to be clear about that. If you would be willing to be introduced as my girlfriend for approximately the next 20 minutes. You don't have to say anything. I'll do all the talking. After 20 minutes, you can say you have a headache, and I will spend the rest of the night telling them how wonderful you are." Silence. She looked at him. Not the way people look when they're figuring out if someone is dangerous, more the way they look when they're trying to determine if something is interesting. "You're serious," she said. "Unfortunately, yes. You walked up to a stranger at a wedding and asked her to pretend to be your girlfriend. I want to stress that I recognize how this sounds." "Ethan!" He turned. His Aunt Patricia was 15 feet away, smiling broadly, Brenda from finance at her elbow. He turned back to the woman in the midnight blue dress with the champagne she hadn't been drinking and the eyes that were clearly deciding something. She looked at Patricia. She looked at Ethan. Something shifted in her expression, something that might have been amusement or might have been something else. He couldn't tell yet. Then she tucked her hand into the crook of his arm with the casual ease of someone who had decided. "You owe me," she said, very quietly, looking straight ahead. "I know," he said. Patricia reached them, and her smile got wider. "There you are. I've been looking all over. And who is this?" "This is Victoria," Ethan said. "My girlfriend." The woman beside him, Victoria apparently, or actually, he didn't know yet, extended her other hand with an ease that was almost theatrical. "Hi. I've heard so much about you. Ethan talks about his family constantly." Patricia shook her hand, clearly charmed. Brenda from finance took a small step back. Ethan kept his expression pleasant and felt the particular calm of a man who has made a catastrophic decision and is now simply along for the ride. Victoria played the next 20 minutes like someone who had done this before, or possibly like someone who was simply very good at reading rooms. She asked Patricia questions. Where are you from? How do you know the couple? And listened to the answers with the kind of focused attention that made people feel interesting. She laughed at the right moments. She touched Ethan's arm once when she was making a point, the way couples do, and it was so natural that he almost forgot it was staged. When Patricia finally drifted away to find the groom's mother, Victoria removed her hand from his arm with the same ease with which she'd placed it there. 20 minutes, she said. I want it noted that I didn't even get a proper introduction. I'm Ethan Mercer, he said. I know I should have said that first. I'm sorry. I was panicking. Victoria Sinclair. She looked at him sidelong. What exactly are you going to do when they want to meet me again? I'm going to figure that out, probably tomorrow. Tonight I'm going to focus on surviving. She made a sound that was almost a laugh. How long have you been telling them about this fictional girlfriend? About 45 minutes. She looked at him. You've been building this elaborate deception for 45 minutes. I want to be clear. It felt like a good idea at the time. This time she actually laughed, a short, genuine sound, like she'd been surprised into it. She turned back toward the vineyard hills, and he got the impression she was deciding whether to be done with this conversation. Daddy! Lily appeared from around the end of a vine row at full speed, her flower girl dress already developing a grass stain that Dana was going to have opinions about, her dark hair escaping from whatever arrangement someone had spent 20 minutes constructing. She hit Ethan's side like a small missile and wrapped her arms around his waist. There you are, she announced, like he'd been the one who disappeared. Dana said you ran away. I didn't run away. I went for a walk. That's the same thing. Lily pulled back and looked up at him with the direct, uncomplicated authority of an 8-year-old who trusted her own assessment of situations. Then she noticed Victoria. Children, in Ethan's experience, did one of two things when they encountered unfamiliar adults. They either retreated immediately or they engaged with complete confidence and zero filter. Lily had always been the second kind. Hi, she said to Victoria. I'm Lily. I'm the flower girl. I dropped some of the petals too fast at the beginning, but then I slowed down, so I think it was okay. Victoria looked at Lily with an expression Ethan couldn't quite categorize. Something in it shifted, something that had been controlled and measured, becoming briefly unguarded. I saw you, Victoria said. You did great. Lily beamed. Then, with the logic of a child who moves between thoughts like stepping stones, Are you my dad's friend? Ethan started to say something that was probably going to be awkward. Victoria spoke first. Something like that, she said. We just met. My dad doesn't have very many friends, Lily said helpfully. Lily, Ethan said. It's true, you said so. You said you lost touch with people after Mom died. She delivered this the way children deliver things. Factually, without weight, the way you say the sky is blue. I have a lot of friends. I could share some. Victoria was quiet for a moment. Then she crouched down to Lily's level, which Ethan noted was something adults often meant to do, but frequently didn't bother. Which ones? Victoria asked. I should know who I'm getting before I agree to anything. Lily considered this with appropriate seriousness. Probably not Maya because she's my best friend and I'm keeping her, but maybe Sophie. Sophie is nice, but she talks about horses a lot, and I like horses, but not that much. That seems fair, Victoria said. I'd want to know up front about the horses. Lily nodded, satisfied with this assessment, then looked at her father. Can I go back to the cake? Dana said there might be a second cake. Go find Dana, he said. Stay where I can see you. She was already running. Ethan watched her go, and when he looked back, Victoria was standing again, watching him watch his daughter with an expression he couldn't fully read. She's wonderful, Victoria said. It wasn't the polite thing people said about children to the parents in front of them. It was quieter than that. She is, he said. She's the best thing in my life by a significant margin. A pause. The reception sound drifted toward them on the warm air. I should go back, Victoria said. Of course. Thank you. Genuinely. I know that was a strange thing to agree to. She looked at him. You were honest with me, at least. Most people aren't. She said it casually, like it was an observation about weather. Why didn't you just, I don't know, tell your family you weren't ready to date again? I've told them that for 3 years. They don't hear it anymore. They think they know better than I do what I need. He paused. Maybe they do. I don't know. It was more honest than he'd intended to be. He wasn't sure what it was about this woman that made him say actual things, possibly the fact that she'd already done him a significant favor and had nothing to gain by being kind to him. She looked at him for a moment in a way that felt like she was making a decision about something. Good night, Ethan Mercer, she said. Good night, Victoria Sinclair. She walked back toward the reception. He stood among the vines and watched her go, and told himself that was the end of it. He drove home to Crestfield that night with Lily asleep in the back seat, and he thought about the Sunday dinner he was now obligated to produce a girlfriend for, and he thought about the logistics of inventing a long-distance relationship that would eventually need to end gracefully, and somewhere around the 2-hour mark he stopped thinking about logistics and thought instead about the way Victoria Sinclair had crouched down to look his daughter in the eye, like she was worth the effort. He told himself it didn't matter. He'd never see her again. Crestfield, California was the kind of small town that showed up on road signs with a population number that hadn't been updated in a decade. Population 4,200, technically, though it felt more like 3,800 on a slow week. It sat in the inland valley an hour from Sacramento, surrounded by farmland that was equal parts productive and stubborn. The kind of land that rewarded people who were willing to work with it and punished people who thought they could work against it. Ethan had grown up 40 miles from here and come to Crestfield after Sarah died, which had confused people at the time. He'd had a decent job in Sacramento. Friends. A life with infrastructure. Instead, he'd bought 16 acres of scrubland with a farmhouse that needed significant attention and spent the better part of a year learning how to be a different kind of person than the one he'd been. People in Crestfield had accepted him the way small towns accepted people who were clearly staying and clearly working. Gradually, without ceremony, and with the specific kind of respect reserved for someone who doesn't complain about hard things. The ranch wasn't profitable yet, not really. He raised chickens, had a small vegetable operation that sold to 2 restaurants in town, and did odd jobs in the summer. He'd been supplementing with his savings and trying not to look directly at the math. It was going to be fine. He was fairly sure it was going to be fine. Monday morning, he woke at 5:30, the same as always, fed the chickens in the gray pre-dawn light, drank coffee on the porch while the sky went from dark blue to pale yellow, and watched Lily sleep for 2 minutes through her bedroom window the way he did most mornings, a thing he never mentioned to anyone because it was his. Then Dana called. Mom wants to confirm dinner, 2 weeks from Sunday. I heard her. So you're bringing her? I'm working on it. Ethan, Dana's voice was patient. If you made this person up, you need to just tell Mom that. She'll be upset for a few days and then she'll move on. I didn't make her up. You said she worked in tech. She does. That's weirdly specific for someone who's made up. Dana. I'm just saying, it's it. Her name is Victoria Sinclair, he said. She was at the wedding. She's real. A pause. And are you actually dating her? We talked for 20 minutes, he said. So technically, no. Another pause, longer. Ethan, what exactly did you do? He explained. Dana's silence during the explanation was the particular silence of someone trying very hard not to laugh. You asked a stranger to pretend to be your girlfriend, she said when he finished. Yes? At a wedding. Yes. And she said yes. For 20 minutes, it was very bounded. She was very clear about that. So your plan is to... I don't have a plan yet. Ethan? I'm aware, Dana. She did laugh then, briefly. Okay, look. I have the guest list for the wedding. Marcus had it sent digitally. If this Victoria Sinclair was actually there, she should be on it. Do you want me to look her up? He thought about that for a moment. The particular thing he was feeling was difficult to name. Something between wanting to know and wanting to leave the whole thing where it had stopped, out in the vineyard, clean and contained. Sure, he said. Dana called back 11 minutes later. So, she said, and her voice had a different quality now. Victoria Sinclair. Yeah. As in Sinclair Technologies. He hadn't been paying close enough attention to connect that name. What? Her father was Martin Sinclair. He founded Sinclair Technologies in the 90s. He died 4 years ago and left the company to her. She's been running it since she was 23. Dana paused. Ethan. She's worth somewhere between $3 and $5 billion, depending on which outlet you read. He stood in his kitchen with his coffee going cold and looked out the window at his 16 acres and his chickens and the farmhouse that still had a section of porch railing he kept meaning to fix. Huh, he said. Yeah. Well, he said. That's... okay. Are you going to call her? I don't have her number. I could probably find... Don't, he said. Dana, don't. She heard it and didn't push. Okay? It was 20 minutes. It was a favor. It's done. He paused. I'll figure out the Sunday dinner thing. How? I'll tell Mom something came up. She'll set up another dinner. Then I'll figure that out too. Dana sighed. You're going to tell Mom you broke up with her, aren't you? Eventually. How long until you stage this breakup? I genuinely don't know yet. Ethan? Bye, Dana. He hung up. He stood in the kitchen a little longer. Then he went outside and started on the fence section he'd been putting off, and he worked until his shoulders ached and his mind went quiet, the way it did when he was doing physical things. And he told himself he'd done the right thing and the whole mess would blow over. She showed up on Thursday. He was in the yard at the back of the property, working on the irrigation setup, when he heard a car on the gravel drive, which was unusual because he wasn't expecting anyone. He came around the side of the house to find a black SUV, not conspicuous exactly, but not a local's car, parked near the gate, and Victoria Sinclair standing beside it, looking at his vegetable rows with an expression of calm, specific interest. She was dressed down from the wedding, dark jeans, a simple shirt, her hair loose. She looked like a person, and not a category, which was somehow more startling. She saw him coming around the house and waited. He stopped about 8 feet from her. Neither of them spoke for a moment. "Hi," he said finally. "Hi." She looked around at the property, not scanning it, actually looking at it, the way someone does when they're trying to understand what they're seeing. "This is yours." 16 acres, farmhouse dates to the 50s. The porch railing needs work. He paused. "How do you know where I live?" "I looked you up." She said it straightforwardly, without apology. "I do that. It's a habit." "Right." He wasn't sure what to do with that, so he set it aside. "Okay. I'm in the area looking at some local businesses. Agriculture supply chain for a subsidiary. It's a long explanation." She looked at him directly. "I wanted to see if you'd survived your family." "Mostly." "Sunday dinner still on the table?" "My mother confirmed it yesterday." Victoria made a sound that was almost sympathy. "What's your plan?" "Still developing it." She looked at the vegetable rows again. "What are those?" "Tomatoes, heirloom variety. I've got 2 restaurants in town that buy them, and those are beans. Running a test on a variety that's supposed to be drought tolerant. I'm not convinced yet." She looked at him. "Can I walk it?" He blinked. "The garden?" "If you don't mind." He didn't know exactly why he said yes, but he said yes. She walked the rows with the specific focus of someone who was interested in systems, how things connected, what the logic was, why choices had been made. She asked questions that were sharper than he expected. She knew what nitrogen deficiency looked like in leaves. She knew what a drip system cost to maintain its scale. She didn't perform interest. She either had it or she didn't, and apparently she did. "You're doing this alone?" she asked at the far end of the bean row. "Mostly. I hire help for harvest weeks." "And the chickens?" "And the chickens." "How many?" 60. Selling eggs local, thinking about expanding. She nodded, looking at the line of the hills beyond the property. "You could scale the vegetable operation. You have the soil for it. The tomatoes are good. The investment to scale is the problem." "It usually is." She said it without condescension, like someone stating a fact they dealt with from the other side many times, which, he supposed, she had. Lily came out of the house at 3:15, which meant school had ended, and she'd walked back from the bus stop the way she did on days when Ethan was working, and she appeared around the corner of the house with her backpack still on, and her shoes untied, and stopped when she saw Victoria. "Oh," she said. "You're here." "Hi," Victoria said. Lily looked at her father, then back at Victoria. Then she came forward, backpack bouncing, and stopped in front of her with the evaluating look she used on new situations. "Are you here because of my dad's thing?" she asked. "Lily," Ethan started. "Because Sophie's mom said she heard Grandma saying Dad has a girlfriend, and I asked Dad about it, and he said it was complicated, but I think complicated means yes." She looked at Victoria with the patience of someone who has concluded that adults overcomplicate everything. "So are you his girlfriend?" Victoria looked at Lily, then at Ethan. The corner of her mouth moved. "We're working on the definition," she said to Lily. Lily appeared to find this adequate. "Okay, do you want to see my room? I have a glow-in-the-dark solar system." Victoria looked at Ethan again, checking, not asking permission, just checking. He shrugged, which was the most honest response available. Yeah, Victoria said to Lily. Let's see the solar system. He stood in the yard alone for a moment, holding a garden stake he'd forgotten he was carrying, listening to his daughter explain the names of the planets in the wrong order as they went inside. He didn't know what was happening. He knew he should probably be more concerned about that. She left 2 hours later after drinking coffee on the porch and spending 45 minutes looking at his business numbers. She'd asked to see, and which he'd showed her because he was apparently someone who made questionable decisions in sequence. And telling him plainly, without softening it, 3 things that he was doing wrong and 2 things that were actually working. You should talk to an agricultural development grant through the county, she said. And there's a local food network in the Sacramento area that pays premium for heirloom varieties. You're not connected to them. How do you know about local agricultural grant programs? I own a subsidiary that processes specialty crops. I know the supply chain. She handed his folder of numbers back. You're not doing badly. You're just under-resourced for where you're trying to go. And here I thought I was just barely hanging on. You're barely hanging on with a strategy, she said. That's different from barely hanging on with no idea what you're doing. He looked at her. The evening light was coming in from the west, turning everything that particular amber color that he'd come to love about this part of California, and she was sitting on his damaged porch railing which she'd leaned against like it wasn't giving slightly under her weight, and he was struck again, as he'd been at the wedding, as he'd been all afternoon, by how difficult she was to read and how interesting that was. Why are you here? He asked. Not accusatory, just honest. She looked at him. Something moved behind her eyes. I told you, she said. Business. I know what you told me. A pause. She looked out at the fields. I liked your daughter, she said finally. I wanted to see where she lived. It was probably only part of the answer. He let it be enough. The Sunday dinner, he said. My mother isn't going to stop until she meets whoever I'm supposedly with. I know. I'm not asking you to... 2 conditions, she said, turning to look at him. He waited. 1. Lily thinks whatever she thinks, and we don't actively encourage it. When this ends, it ends clean. She doesn't get confused about what I am. Agreed, he said. And he meant it. That condition was the most important thing she could have said. 2. You're honest with me, whatever this is. She looked at him steadily. I've had enough of people who aren't honest with me. He held her gaze. I'll do my best. She nodded. Your porch railing is going to give way eventually. I know, it's on the list. She stood, picked up her bag from the step. I'll come to dinner, she said. 1 dinner. After that, we figure it out as we go. She walked to her car, and he stayed on the porch and watched the dust rise in the evening air as she drove out, and Lily appeared at the door behind him holding a granola bar and said, Is she coming back? Yeah, he said. She's coming back. Lily leaned against the door frame with the granola bar. Good, she said. She knew that the big one was Jupiter. Most people think it's Saturn. He turned and looked at his daughter, who had already decided something that he hadn't quite caught up to yet, and felt the full weight of the stone behind his sternum shift into something unfamiliar. Not heavier, just different. Come on, he said. I'll make dinner. Can we have the pasta? Yeah, we can have the pasta. They went inside, and the evening settled over the ranch, and the porch railing stood for another night. The Sunday dinner was set for the 14th, which gave Ethan 9 days to figure out what he was doing. He didn't figure it out. He just kept moving the way he always did, because the chickens needed feeding regardless of what was going on in his personal life, and the beans needed checking, and Lily needed help with a history project about the gold rush that she had waited until Wednesday to mention was due Friday. Victoria texted him on Tuesday. Just a short message. What time Sunday? And is there anything I should know about your family before I walk in? He typed back, 6 o'clock. My mother will hug you immediately. My Uncle Roy will say something that seems offensive but isn't. My Aunt Patricia will ask about your family within 4 minutes. Dana will watch you the whole night without appearing to. Don't let the dog jump on you. His name is Biscuit, and he has no manners. She replied, Noted. Do you have any dietary restrictions I should know about for bringing something? You don't have to bring anything. I'm bringing something that's not negotiable. What does Lily like? He stared at that for a moment, then typed, "She's been on a lemon dessert thing lately. No particular reason." The reply was just a thumbs up. He put his phone down and went back to the irrigation problem he'd been working through and told himself this was a transaction. A fair trade, actually. She played a role for his family. He let her look at his business numbers and ask her sharp questions. Both parties walked away with something. It was clean. He mostly believed that. She arrived at 6:03, which was close enough to on time that it wasn't a statement. She was driving herself. No driver, no assistant, just Victoria in a navy jacket and dark pants, carrying a white bakery box and looking completely unbothered, which Ethan suspected was a thing she worked at more than it appeared. He met her at the door before anyone else could. "Biscuit is in the back," he said quietly. "Roy is already on his second beer, which means he's going to be more, not less. Mom made her pot roast, which means she likes you already, because she only makes that when she's trying to impress." "She's trying to impress me," Victoria said, with an expression that suggested she found this idea genuinely surprising. "I'm the one being evaluated. In this family, those are the same thing." She looked at him. "Are you nervous?" "No." "You've said 2 more words than necessary." "I might be slightly nervous," he admitted. She almost smiled. "Okay." She lifted the bakery box slightly. "Lemon tart. The bakery said it serves 8. There are 11 of us." "I know, I bought 2. He looked at her. She looked back, patient. "Come on," he said, and opened the door. The dinner was loud, which Mercer family dinners always were. Not angry loud, just the specific volume that happened when people who'd known each other their whole lives all tried to talk at once, and nobody felt obligated to manage it. His mother's house smelled like pot roast, and the candles she'd lit on the table, which meant she'd been preparing for hours. Margaret Mercer saw Victoria and crossed the living room in about 4 steps and hugged her, which was exactly what Ethan had predicted. Victoria stiffened for a half second. He caught it, then settled into it with the composed grace of someone who had processed something quickly and adjusted. "We're so glad you came," his mother said, holding Victoria at arm's length and looking at her with an expression that was open and immediate and slightly overwhelming. "Ethan never brings anyone anywhere. It took us completely by surprise." "Mom," Ethan said, "it's true. He's very closed off. But—" She was still looking at Victoria with this warm, direct attention. "You must be very patient." "He's not that bad," Victoria said, and she said it lightly, with just enough dry warmth that Ethan's mother laughed, and he saw the exact moment his mother decided she liked her. Roy materialized from the direction of the kitchen with his beer and his broad, uncomplicated grin. "So you're the mystery woman," he said. "I'm not much of a mystery," Victoria said. "That's what mysterious people always say," Roy said cheerfully, like this was deeply clever, and extended his hand. "Roy Mercer. I'm the fun one." "He's not the fun one," Dana said from the doorway to the kitchen. She was watching Victoria with the specific attention she'd promised. Steady, almost clinical, but not unfriendly. "I'm Dana, Ethan's sister." Victoria shook her hand. "He talks about you." "What does he say?" "That you're perceptive and that you don't let things go." Dana looked at Ethan. "I like her," she said to him directly. "Don't tell her that yet," Ethan said. "She'll get comfortable." "I'm already comfortable," Victoria said, which produced another laugh from Roy and a look from Dana that was starting to shade into genuine approval. Lily had been hanging back at the edge of the room, unusual for her, but when Victoria turned and saw her and said, "Hi, solar system," Lily crossed the room at full speed and attached herself to Victoria's side with a certainty that was almost physical, like she'd already done the math and reached a conclusion. Patricia arrived with her questions at the 3-minute 40-second mark, which Ethan noted was actually ahead of schedule. "What is it you do, dear?" she asked, with the well-intentioned intrusiveness of someone who considered other people's lives a form of community property. "Technology," Victoria said. "Software, mostly. Infrastructure for data systems." "Oh." Patricia looked politely confused. "That sounds complicated." "Parts of it," Victoria agreed. "Parts of it are actually very boring. There's a lot of compliance work." "Her company's based in San Francisco," Ethan said. "Oh, how wonderful. Are you from San Francisco originally?" "Virginia," originally, Victoria said. My father moved us west when I was 12. That must have been a big change. It was, Victoria said. She said it simply, without elaborating, and Patricia, who was many things but not quite perceptive enough to push against that kind of simplicity, moved on to something else. Ethan had been watching her field all of this. His family, their noise, their questions, Roy's second and now third beer, the way Lily kept gravitating back to her side like a small satellite. Victoria moved through his family with the controlled ease of someone who was performing, yes, but not carelessly. She was paying attention. She answered questions honestly where she could and deflected where she couldn't in a way that felt conversational rather than evasive. She was good at this. Very good. He wondered, for the first time, what that kind of practiced ease cost. Dinner was at 7. His mother's pot roast was the version she'd been making for 30 years, and it was as good as it had always been, and the table was too crowded and too loud, and Roy told the same story he told at every dinner about the time he'd accidentally fished in a private pond in Monterey, and Lily sat between Ethan and Victoria, and at some point took Victoria's hand under the table for about 3 minutes, for no discernible reason, and then let go, and Victoria didn't mention it, and didn't make a face about it, and just kept talking to Dana about the logistics of running a small business. "You're doing a market study?" Dana asked. She worked in county planning. She had the professional interest of someone who thought about local economies. "Looking at supply chain gaps in agricultural processing in this region," Victoria said. "There's an interesting gap between what small farms produce and what reaches the premium market. The infrastructure between them is inefficient." "Ethan's been saying that for 2 years," Dana said. "His numbers are actually pretty solid for the scale he's operating at." Victoria reached for the bread without looking at him. "He's resource limited, not idea limited." Dana looked at Ethan. Ethan looked at his plate. "She's seen your numbers?" Dana said. "I asked," Victoria said. "He was reluctant." "He's reluctant about everything," Dana said, with the affectionate contempt of a sibling. "I'm right here," Ethan said. "We know," both women said, more or less simultaneously, and Lily laughed so hard she nearly knocked over her water glass. His mother watched this from the other end of the table with an expression that Ethan only caught for a second, something soft and careful that she smoothed over quickly when she noticed him looking. He turned back to his food. The lemon tarts were consumed in their entirety, which Lily announced was a record for dessert. Victoria drank 1 glass of wine over the whole evening and switched to water without explanation, and refused his mother's offer of coffee twice before accepting on the 3rd try, which was exactly how the Mercer family coffee ritual worked, and which Victoria had somehow intuited or guessed, or simply read correctly off the group dynamic. After 9 o'clock, the ants filtered out and Roy fell asleep in the armchair in the living room, and Dana was washing dishes even though she'd been told not to, and Lily had gone quiet in the way she did when she was fighting sleep and losing. Ethan found Victoria near the back door, looking out at the yard through the glass, holding her coffee. "You can probably leave whenever," he said quietly. "You've done more than enough." She turned slightly. "Does your mother need help with anything?" "She'll say no and mean it. She likes to put the kitchen back together herself." Victoria nodded. She looked out at the dark yard again. The porch light was on, making a yellow circle in the grass. "Your family is good," she said. After a moment, "I mean that in the way that's hard to explain. They're just good. They actually like each other." "They drive me insane," he said. "Most of the time." "I know, that's part of it." She said it without any particular tone, like she was reporting a fact about physics. He looked at the side of her face. He'd been careful about that all evening, not looking at her too much, because they were supposed to be a couple, and couples didn't stare at each other over dinner. They just existed in the same space with a comfort that he and Victoria hadn't actually built yet. "Do you have siblings?" he asked. "No." Brief, clean. "Your family?" "My father died 4 years ago," she said. "My mother left when I was 9. I have some extended family on my father's side that I see at major company events, which is the same as not seeing them." She paused. "I don't say that for sympathy. It's just the accurate picture." He looked out at the yard alongside her. "My family makes me feel guilty," he said, "for not being more present. For coming out here and building something separate. He paused. My mother thinks I hid. Did you? Probably, he said, but I built something real in the process, so I've made my peace with it. She looked at him. That measuring quality was in her eyes again, the thing that felt like calibration. You're more self-aware than most people who are actually honest, she said. Is that a compliment? It's an observation. I'll take it. She finished her coffee, set the cup on the counter inside through the cracked door. I'll call you this week, she said. There's an agricultural development officer I know at the county level. Not our county, but she'd know who to talk to. About the grants. Victoria. It's not charity. It's a network introduction. Those are free. He looked at her. You don't have to do this. I know I don't. Her voice was even. I'm choosing to. He couldn't find the right thing to say to that, so he just nodded. She said goodnight to Dana, who hugged her. Dana, who did not hug strangers, who hugged her. And said something quiet to his mother that made his mother's face do the thing it had done at the dinner table. That soft and careful thing. And then she was gone, her headlights sweeping across the dark yard as she turned out of the drive. Ethan helped Dana finish the dishes. She really looked at your numbers, Dana said. Yeah. Voluntarily. She asked. Dana was quiet for a moment, stacking plates. She watches you, she said. I noticed. Not in the way people watch someone they're with, more like she's trying to figure something out. She's analytical, he said. She does that with everyone. Maybe. Dana put the last plate away and turned to lean against the counter. Ethan, I'm not going to say a whole thing. I just want to say, whatever this is, be careful. Not with her. With yourself. She paused. You're not as closed off as you think you are. Lily isn't either. He didn't answer. He looked at the dish towel in his hands. I know, he said finally. He did know. He just wasn't entirely sure what to do with the knowing yet. She came back on Wednesday. No text. No call. He was on the roof of the chicken coop, tacking down a section that had lifted in the wind, and he heard the gravel and looked down, and there she was, shielding her eyes against the afternoon sun to look up at him. You didn't tell me you were coming, he said. I was in the area. You keep being in the area. The area is relevant to my work right now. She looked at the coop. What happened to the roof? Wind. We had a system come through last week. Do you need help? You're going to help me with a chicken coop roof. I helped my father re-roof a cabin when I was 17. I'm not incompetent. She set her bag on the fence post. Pass me a hammer. He passed her a hammer. They worked for an hour in the warm afternoon quiet. She wasn't fast, but she was methodical. And she followed instruction without needing to make a point of it, which was rarer in Ethan's experience than it should have been. Lily got off the bus at 3:15 and appeared in the yard with her backpack and stopped dead when she saw Victoria on the coop roof with a hammer. Cool, Lily said. Don't stand there, Ethan said. You'll get nails on you. I won't get nails on me. Go change out of your school stuff. Lily looked at Victoria. Are you staying for dinner? Victoria looked at Ethan. You can stay for dinner, he said. The words came out more easily than they should have. Only if I'm not. You're not. He pulled another nail. We're having chicken, which is slightly weird given the context, but there it is. Lily laughed. Victoria shook her head slightly, which was becoming her version of laughing, and went back to the section she was tacking down. They ate at the kitchen table, the three of them, without ceremony. Ethan made the chicken the way he always made it, which was simple and reliable, and Lily talked almost continuously about a disagreement she'd had with a boy in her class about whether sharks had feelings, and Victoria argued with apparent genuine investment that sharks absolutely had something that functioned like feelings and that the science on this was more interesting than people realized. How do you know about shark feelings? Lily asked. I read a lot, Victoria said. What do you read? Depends. Science mostly. Some history. Occasionally very bad mystery novels that I don't tell people about. Lily pointed at her. I'm going to remember that. I know you will. I already regret saying it. Lily grinned, a wide, uncomplicated grin, and went back to her chicken. Ethan watched the two of them and felt something he didn't name, because naming it felt like putting weight on something he wasn't sure would hold weight yet. After dinner, Lily did her homework at the table with focused inefficiency, getting through math by way of 12 small distractions. And Victoria sat across from her and worked on her laptop, and Ethan washed the dishes and listened to the quiet of it. The specific domestic quiet of two people in the same space not needing to fill it. He'd forgotten what that felt like. He remembered it now. Masam. The second week followed the pattern of the first. Victoria appeared every few days, always with a reason that made operational sense, always careful to text first after the unannounced Wednesday, always staying in the clear defined space of what they'd agreed to, business, Lily's company, and the particular ease they were building in the time between. She arranged the call with the agricultural development contact. The woman's name was Renata, and she worked out of Sacramento, and she walked Ethan through 2 grant programs that were specifically designed for his scale of operation in 45 minutes on a Tuesday afternoon, and by the end of it he had 2 applications to fill out and the genuine sense that he might be on the verge of something real. He told Victoria that night. Renata was great, he said. They were on the phone because she was in San Francisco for a board meeting, and this had become a thing that happened. Calls in the evening, after Lily's bedtime, when the house was quiet and the day had settled. She's good at identifying fits, Victoria said. She was looking at agricultural networks before she went into the public sector. How do you know her? She consulted for one of our subsidiary teams 3 years ago. We stayed in touch. A pause. The Heirloom Valley Network is the better opportunity for your tomatoes. The grant will help with infrastructure, but the network is ongoing revenue. I know. I've been researching them. He was sitting on the porch, the railing still unrepaired, but he'd gotten to the other things first. And the night was warm and the stars were very clear the way they got in the valley in late June. Can I ask you something? You're going to ask anyway. Why are you doing this? He said it quietly, without accusation. Not the dinner, that I get. That was a trade. This. Silence. Not empty silence. The kind that meant someone was choosing what to say. Your operation is viable, she said finally. It's under-resourced and you're doing too much alone, but the underlying idea is sound. Connecting it to the right networks doesn't cost me anything except time. That's the professional answer. It's the honest one. Victoria. Another pause. I like it out there, she said. The admission came out slightly stripped down, like she'd removed something from it in transit. I spend a lot of my time in rooms where everyone wants something from me. Boardrooms, meetings, dinners, where people are nice because of what I control. Your ranch is... She stopped. It's just a farm. Nobody out there is thinking about what they can get from me. He was quiet. That sounds more pathetic than I meant it to, she said. It doesn't sound pathetic. It sounds like I'm hiding. Maybe you are, he said. But I built something real in the process, so... A beat of silence. Then she made the sound that was her version of laughing, and he felt it in his chest in a way he filed away and didn't examine. The test was something he only understood in retrospect. At the time, it looked like an opportunity. A man named Pierce Walton showed up at the ranch on a Thursday afternoon 3 weeks after the Sunday dinner. He was in his early 50s, well-dressed in a way that read as carefully maintained, and he arrived in a car that was expensive enough to make the Crestfield Road look slightly apologetic about itself. He introduced himself as a development consultant working on a regional food and agriculture initiative backed by a consortium of investors. And he was very interested, he said, in Ethan's operation. He had a card. He had a brochure. He had numbers that were, on the face of them, very good. We're looking to partner with small producers who have strong local identity, Walton said, sitting across the kitchen table from Ethan with a quality of ease that was professional and slightly rehearsed. Your operation has exactly the profile we're interested in. We'd offer a guaranteed purchase contract at a premium rate, some infrastructure development, and a co-branding arrangement. What's the catch? Ethan asked. Walton smiled. No catch. We take 60% of your production output and handle the distribution side. You focus on growing. 60%. At a premium rate. You'd see significant income lift in the first year. Ethan looked at the brochure. The numbers were real. He could do the math in his head, and they held. It would solve the resource problem. It would eliminate the income uncertainty that he'd been managing carefully for 2 years. He'd be producing for someone else's brand with 60% of what he grew. He'd be signing over control of the operation he'd spent 2 years building in exchange for stability. He sat with that for a moment. "I appreciate you coming out," he said. "I need to think about it." Walton left his card and his brochure and his easy smile, and Ethan sat at the kitchen table after the expensive car had turned out of the drive and looked at the numbers for a long time. He called Victoria. "Someone came to see me today," he said. "Pierce Walton. Says he's with a regional agriculture consortium." A short silence. "What did he offer?" Ethan laid it out. When he finished, Victoria was quiet for a moment. "And?" she said. "And I told him I'd think about it." "What are you actually thinking?" "That 60% output and co-branding means I'm a contractor with land, not a business owner." He paused. "The numbers are good. On paper, they solve my problems." "Do you know who's behind the consortium?" He said investors, didn't name them. "I'll find out," she said. "Give me an hour." She called back in 40 minutes. "The consortium is real," she said. "But 2 of the 3 primary backers are commodity processing groups. They do this. They come in with premium pricing, build dependency in small producers, then renegotiate terms at year 2 when the producer is locked into their infrastructure." He sat with that. "Okay," he said. "The Heirloom Valley Network offers 50% less upfront income, but you own the relationship. 5 years in, it's a better position." "I know." He'd known before she called. He'd known sitting across from Walton and his easy smile. "I just wanted to be sure about what I was saying no to." Silence. Then, "Most people take the shortcut, Ethan." "I'm not most people." Another beat. Her voice, when it came, was quieter. "No, you're not." He didn't know she was testing him. She hadn't announced it as a test, and it didn't feel like one. It felt like a genuine opportunity with genuine costs, which was what it had been. But later, much later, she would tell him that Walton's consortium was real, and Walton's pitch was real, but she had known Walton was operating in the valley, and she had also known, because she'd done her research, that he would eventually reach out to Ethan's operation. She'd waited to see what Ethan would do. She didn't frame it as a test. She called it paying attention. He called it the same thing, eventually, because the word testing implied a judgment she was holding over someone, and that wasn't what she'd done. She'd just watched. She'd watched to see if he was who he appeared to be, because she'd spent years learning the hard way that people revealed themselves through their choices and not through what they said about themselves. What she found was a man who turned down an easy answer because it wasn't his kind of answer. It didn't make her fall in love with him. It wasn't that simple. And she wasn't that simple. But it was the thing that made her stop holding herself at distance. The holding at distance, it turned out, had been more extensive than Ethan realized. He understood this the evening it changed. It was a Saturday. Late July now, the valley heat sitting heavy and dry over everything. And they were on the porch after dinner, Lily asleep inside, the 2 of them in the old chairs that needed replacing but that he kept because they were the right height for looking at the stars. It had become the shape of her visits. Dinner? Always dinner now. Always the 3 of them at the kitchen table, and then the evening, and then she'd drive back to wherever she was staying when she was in the valley, a hotel in the next town over that she'd picked because she said the bed was good and that it was a 20-minute drive, which meant she had to want to be somewhere to go. She'd been coming for almost a month. "The board is pushing for a major acquisition," she said. She'd mentioned the board before, in fragments, the way people mention things they're carrying without wanting to put them down entirely. "They want to go public within 18 months. It would put significant value on the company and significant pressure on everything else. Is that what you want?" "I don't know." She said it honestly, which he was learning was how she said everything that mattered. "My father built the company to last, not to scale for exit. Going public changes what it is." She paused. "What it is matters to me. Can you stop it?" "I'm the largest single shareholder. I can slow it down. But the board has momentum, and I've been distracted." She said distracted, and they both understood what she meant, and neither of them said it directly. "What would your father have done?" he asked. She was quiet for a long time. The stars were very clear. He would have told me to decide what I actually wanted, she said, and then built the argument around that, not the other way around. She paused. He was better at that than I am. He actually knew what he wanted. Another pause. I used to think I did. What do you want? Ethan asked. She turned to look at him, and in the dark he could see her eyes. And there was something in them that she wasn't covering. Not because she'd stopped being careful, but because she'd decided, in this moment, not to be. I don't know, she said again, but this time it landed differently. He reached over and took her hand, not as a gesture, not as the kind of deliberate thing that announces itself. Just reached over and took it, because she was close and he was tired of not doing the things that made sense to do. She looked down at their hands, then she laced her fingers through his. They sat like that for a while without talking. The night moved around them. Insects, a distant truck on the county road, the sound of the chickens settling. Ordinary sounds. The sound of a life that was small enough to hear. She left at 10:30, which was later than usual. Standing at her car, she looked at him with the measuring quality she always had, but there was something different in the calibration now, something that had shifted. I'll be up here again Wednesday, she said. I know, he said. She drove away and he stood on the gravel until the lights had gone, and then he stood there a little longer just because he could. What? Dana called on Sunday morning. I heard she's been coming up regularly, Dana said. No preamble. Who told you? Mom, who heard from Roy, who apparently drove through Crestfield on Wednesday and saw her car. Roy doesn't know what her car looks like. He figured it out. Roy is not as dumb as he seems when he's drinking. Dana paused. How are you doing with this, actually? Fine. Ethan. I'm fine, Dana. I don't know what it is yet. We're figuring it out. Lily? He thought about Lily, who had started saving the good chair at the kitchen table for Victoria, who had started mentioning her in the casual, woven-in way she mentioned Dana or Roy, as a given, as a permanent part of the landscape. Lily is Lily, he said. That's not an answer. I know. Dana was quiet. He could hear her doing something in her kitchen, the sound of a cabinet. I'm not trying to interfere, she said finally. I just want to make sure you're... She stopped. You're allowed to want something, Ethan. You know that. I know. You spent 3 years convincing yourself you weren't supposed to want things. You're allowed to stop doing that. He looked out the kitchen window at the yard, at the gate, at the road that came in from the county road, and reached all the way to where he was standing. I know, he said, for the third time. This time he meant it differently. She came on Wednesday, and Thursday. And the following Saturday she arrived in the late morning, and she and Lily spent 2 hours doing something in the yard that involved chalk and an elaborate system of rules that Ethan was not fully briefed on, and he worked on the porch railing, finally, the porch railing, and watched them from across the yard, and the weight behind his sternum that he'd been carrying for 3 years felt, for the first time, like it might be changing its nature. Not disappearing, just becoming something he was carrying by choice, rather than because he had no alternative. That evening, after Lily was in bed, Victoria stood in the kitchen doorway watching him finish the dishes, and he turned and she was looking at him with an expression that he'd been cataloging since the vineyard, guarded and unguarded at the same time, like a building where someone had finally opened a window. I've been testing you, she said. He set the dish towel down, turned to face her properly. I know. She looked startled, which was rare. You knew? Not specifics, but I'm not completely oblivious. He leaned back against the counter. The consortium, the investment opportunities, the way you watched me with your family. He paused. It didn't bother me. It should have. Why? You'd been hurt before. It made sense. He looked at her. Did I pass? She held his gaze for a long moment. Then, that's not really how I'd frame it. Then how would you frame it? She crossed the kitchen to where he was standing, and she stopped close enough that he could see the small things, the line of tension at the corner of her mouth, the thing in her eyes that was either courage or exhaustion or both. I stopped believing people were real, she said. People with that much access to what I could give them, I stopped thinking any of it was separate from what I had. She paused. You are very aggressively separate from what I have. I'm broke, he said. You're not broke. You're constrained. Something shifted in her expression. You turned down an easy answer because it wasn't yours. The consortium. Among other things. He looked at her face, which was 5 years younger than his and a great deal more complicated, and which had been held at careful distance since the first moment he'd walked up to her at the edge of a vineyard and said something insane. What are you telling me? He asked. She looked at him steadily. That I think this stopped being pretend somewhere around the second week, she said, and I wanted to be honest about it, because you asked me to be. He'd asked her to be honest with him. He'd said that was the second condition. He remembered it clearly, standing on his porch with the evening coming in from the west. He put his hand on the side of her face, and she didn't pull back, and he kissed her in his own kitchen with the dish towel on the counter and the porch railing finally fixed and Lily asleep down the hall. And it was not smooth, and it was not a revelation. It was just two people finding each other in the middle of their actual lives in the specific, imperfect way that actually happens, which was the only way that mattered. When they pulled back, she looked at him with those measuring eyes, and whatever she'd been calibrating had landed somewhere new. Your mother is going to be insufferable about this, she said. My mother is already insufferable about this, he said. She almost smiled. Almost. I know, she said. August came in hot and stayed that way. The valley baked under a sun that had stopped being polite about it, and Ethan's irrigation system ran twice a day, and still the soil at the edges of the property cracked in fine lines like old porcelain. The tomatoes loved it. The beans were ambivalent. The chickens were deeply unhappy and made their feelings known. The ranch itself, though, was different than it had been 2 months ago. The Heirloom Valley Network contract had come through in late July. Not the volume he'd eventually need, but a real start, with real numbers, and the kind of premium pricing that made the math begin to work properly for the first time since he'd bought the property. The county grant application was in review. Renata from Sacramento had called to tell him she'd flagged it personally, which meant nothing official but meant something practical. He was building something. He knew it in a way he hadn't let himself know it before, when it had felt presumptuous to believe in something that hadn't proven itself yet. Victoria was part of that, not because she'd handed him anything, but because she'd pointed him in the right direction and then made him walk there himself. He understood now why that distinction mattered to her. He'd felt the difference between charity and navigation, and he was grateful for the second thing in a way he wouldn't have known how to name a year ago. She was in San Francisco more than Crestfield these days. The board situation had escalated. She told him about it in pieces, over the phone, in the particular late-night way they'd developed for the things that were too complicated for text. The acquisition push was being led by a man named Garrett Cole, who was the second largest shareholder and who had, according to Victoria, been working toward this for 2 years with the patience of someone who was very good at waiting. He wants the IPO, she'd said one night in early August, lying in the dark somewhere in San Francisco while he sat on his porch in Crestfield with the warm night around him. Not because it's the right move for the company, because his fund needs the exit. And the other board members? 3 are aligned with him. 2 are genuinely neutral. One is, he's old school. He cares about the company. But he's 82 and he gets tired in meetings. Can you get to the neutral ones? I'm trying. It requires a very specific kind of conversation, the kind where you convince people to vote against their short-term financial interest by making the long-term case credibly. Can you make the case? I can make the case. I'm not sure anyone will hear it. A pause. Garrett is very good at shaping the narrative before I get to it. He'd heard something in her voice then that she didn't usually let through. Not quite fear, but something adjacent to it. The thing underneath competence when competence is being pushed. What does he have on you? Ethan asked. Silence. Long enough that he thought the question had gone wrong somewhere. He doesn't have anything, she said finally. He's just watching for something to use. He's been doing it since I took the chair. Ethan sat with that. He'll find me, she said quietly. Everyone in that room knows They know I'm not my father, that I came to it young, and that I've held it by being smarter than they expected. Not because they believed in me. She paused. Garrett knows the difference. You've run that company for 4 years. Yes. The numbers are strong. I know. Numbers aren't always the argument, Ethan. Her voice was patient, not unkind. In rooms like this, narrative is the argument, and the narrative Garrett is building is that I'm distracted, that my attention is divided. He understood what she meant. He just didn't say it. He knows about me, Ethan said. He knows I've been spending time out of the city. He has people. He always has people. She was quiet. He doesn't know specifics yet, but Garrett Cole does not leave gaps in his information for long. He met Garrett Cole for the first and only time in the second week of August. He hadn't planned to. It happened the way things happen when someone has orchestrated the circumstances to make them look accidental. Victoria had a meeting in Sacramento, a regulatory briefing, something about telecommunications infrastructure that he didn't fully follow, but that had required her to be in the city for 2 days. She was staying at a hotel near the Capitol, and on the second evening she'd called and asked if he wanted to drive in for dinner, which he'd done, leaving Lily with Dana for the night. They'd eaten at a restaurant near the waterfront, a good one, the kind that had proper linen and a menu without prices, which Ethan was quietly aware of. And it had been the best evening they'd had, maybe, since the whole thing had found its shape. Something about being in a city together, without the ranch context, made her different in a way he couldn't fully articulate. She was still Victoria, the same measuring intelligence, the same carefully rationed humor, but she was also something he hadn't seen before, more at ease almost, like Sacramento was neutral territory. They were walking back toward the hotel at around 9:30 when a man separated from a group of people outside a bar across the street and crossed toward them with the particular ease of someone who has decided to do something and is now simply doing it. He was in his mid-50s, tall, with the kind of face that photographs well, and the kind of clothes that cost enough to be invisible. He smiled at Victoria first, and then at Ethan, and the smile was the same for both of them. Warm, frictionless, engineered. Victoria, he said, I didn't know you were in Sacramento. Garrett, her voice was even, the kind of even that took effort. Regulatory briefing. You? Dinner with some colleagues. He glanced at Ethan with an expression of polite inquiry that contained something else at its center, something Ethan recognized without being able to name it immediately. You must be Ethan Mercer. Ethan shook his hand. You have me at a disadvantage. Garrett Cole. I'm on Victoria's board. He said it with the ease of someone who owns the word board the way other people own furniture. I've heard about you. Should I be worried about what you've heard? Garrett smiled. Not at all. Nothing but good things. He looked between them. It's good to see you out, Victoria. We've all been concerned. Long hours. I'm fine, she said. Of course you are. Garrett's attention shifted back to Ethan. Brief, precise, like a scan. What is it you do, Ethan? Small farm operation, outside Crestfield. Agriculture. Garrett said the word with polite interest and absolutely no actual interest. How long have you been doing that? 2 years. Significant change from what? Before? Project management, Ethan said. Sacramento area. And you left to farm? Garrett's tone was neutral. That was the tell. It was too neutral. The neutrality of a person who has decided on a characterization and is looking for evidence. I left to build something, Ethan said. Farming was what was available. Right. Garrett smiled again. Victoria must appreciate the contrast with the city. It was very precise, the way a good knife is precise. The implication sat in the air between them. She's slumming. How charming. How temporary. And was immediately buried under the continued smile. Victoria's hand was in the crook of Ethan's arm. He felt it tighten very slightly. We should get back, she said. Early morning. Of course. Garrett stepped back graciously. It was good to see you, Victoria. And nice to meet you, Ethan. He looked at Ethan one more time. Not long, just enough. Take care of her. He walked away before either of them could respond. They walked half a block in silence. The Sacramento night was warm and the sidewalk was crowded, and Ethan thought about the particular quality of Garrett Cole's attention, the way it had moved between them, cataloging, assembling. "That wasn't accidental," he said. "No," Victoria said. "He wanted to see me. He wanted to assess you." She paused. "He's been trying to find something he can use. I told you." "How dangerous is he?" She was quiet long enough that it was an answer in itself. "He's not going to do anything illegal," she said. "He doesn't need to. He just needs to control the story well enough that the neutral board members move his way. A CEO who's romantically distracted, involved with someone whose profile creates liability concerns." "I'm a liability concern," Ethan said. Not bitterly, just stating it. "To Garrett, yes." She looked at him. "Not to me." He nodded. They walked the rest of the way to the hotel without resolving anything, because there was nothing to resolve yet. Garrett Cole hadn't done anything. He was just watching the way Victoria had described, waiting for the gap in information to close so he could use it. Ethan thought about that on the drive home the next morning, about the gap in information, about what Garrett had seen and what he would do with it. He told himself there was nothing Garrett could do that would actually matter. He was wrong, but he didn't know that yet. The story broke on a Thursday morning in the third week of August. He heard about it from Dana, who'd seen it on her phone and called him at 7 a.m. while he was still in the middle of the morning chicken routine. "There's a story on 3 different outlets," Dana said without preamble. "About Victoria." "What kind of story?" "About you, actually." A pause. "Come inside and look at your phone." He finished the feeding, went inside, and opened his phone. The headline on the first outlet read, "Sinclair Tech, CEO's secret romance, who is the small-town farmer she's been hiding." He clicked through. The story was 300 words of not quite anything. A description of his ranch, his background, his income level, a quote from an unnamed source close to Sinclair's board describing concerns about the CEO's recent patterns of distraction. There was a photo of him and Victoria walking in Sacramento. It had been taken from across the street, which meant someone had been positioned there. It had been taken the night they'd run into Garrett Cole. The second outlet was sharper. Billionaire CEO Victoria Sinclair. Linked to broke California rancher. Investors growing uneasy. He put his phone down on the kitchen counter. He picked it up again and read the second article fully. It described him, accurately, which was the thing that made it work, as a former project manager who'd left a stable career to purchase a marginal agricultural property, currently operating at a loss, with outstanding business grants under review. It described his wife's death. It described Lily. There was a quote from a real estate assessment putting the property value at below market. There was a line about questions regarding the CEO's judgment and focus at a critical juncture for the company. It was all true. That was the craft of it. Everything individually accurate, assembled into a portrait that was designed to mean something specific. He sat down at the kitchen table. Lily came downstairs in her pajamas, hair matted from sleep, carrying a stuffed bear she'd had since she was 4 and had recently decided she was too old for and kept under the bed, but clearly still retrieved. She stopped when she saw his face. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong." He managed a reasonable approximation of normal. "Go get dressed. You've got 20 minutes before the bus." She looked at him with the unconvinced expression of a child who knows when she's being managed. "Is it about Victoria?" The fact that that was her first question told him something about how thoroughly Victoria had become part of the furniture of their lives. "Go get dressed, Lilybug." She went. He called Victoria. It went to voicemail. He texted, "Saw it. Call me when you can." She called back 40 minutes later. Her voice was controlled in a way that was different from her usual controlled. Tighter, like something pulled past its tolerance. "I know," she said before he could speak. "Where are you?" "San Francisco. I've been in the office since 6. A pause. "My communications team has been fielding calls since the first story went up. There are 2 more outlets now. One of them has significantly more detail." "Where's it coming from?" "Garrett." She said it with certainty, not bitterness, just a fact. "Not directly. He'll have gone through 2 or 3 intermediaries, so there's no paper trail. But it came from the board level, and he's the only one who had the motive and the access." "Can you prove it?" "Not yet." Her voice shifted very slightly. Ethan, I need you to understand that this is going to get noisier before it gets quieter. Okay? The board is meeting Friday. I have 3 calls this morning with investors who've already reached out. Garrett is going to use this to make the case that I'm not focused. Are you focused? A beat of silence. I'm trying to be. What do you need me to do? She was quiet long enough that it made his stomach tighten. Right now, nothing, she said. Right now I need to manage the board situation and the investor calls, and I need... She stopped, restarted. I need to not be worried about you and Lily while I'm doing all of that. Can you tell me you're okay? I'm okay, he said. It was mostly true. Lily's going to school. The chickens are fed. I'm fine. He heard something release in her voice. Okay. Victoria, what is he going to do at the board meeting? He's going to call for a vote on a governance review, essentially a vote of confidence, framed as procedural, but designed to put me on record defending myself. She paused. He's good at framing. And if you lose the vote? I won't lose. I have the numbers. Another pause, smaller. Probably, he repeated. I have them, she said, with slightly more certainty. I just need to hold them. He held things together for the next 3 days by focusing on what was in front of him. That was a skill he'd developed after Sarah died. The ability to reduce his operational radius to what was immediate and real and manageable, and let everything outside that radius exist without requiring his constant attention. The chickens needed care. The tomato harvest was running ahead of schedule, and the Heirloom Valley network needed a confirmed delivery date. Lily needed dinner and homework help, and someone to watch a nature documentary with her on Wednesday night about deep-sea creatures that Ethan found mildly disturbing and Lily found transfixing. He didn't look at the news again after the first morning. He'd made that decision and held it. What was in the coverage didn't change based on whether he read it, and reading it served no function except to make him feel the thing he was carefully not spending energy on. It was Dana who told him about the social media element. It's getting mean, she said on the phone Thursday evening. Some of the comments, targeting you mostly. A few that are about Lily. What kind of comments about Lily? Nothing dangerous, just people saying things about what it means to bring a child into that kind of attention. The good intent, bad execution kind of cruelty. She paused. I'm sorry. I thought you should know. He sat with that. She doesn't have any of those accounts, he said. I know. He looked at the kitchen table where Lily's homework was spread from the evening and felt something move through him that was specific and cold. Not fear, more like the low, steady anger of a person who has found the thing they will not be calm about. Is there anything actionable? Not legally, it's just noise. Okay. Ethan, I said, okay, Dana, I'm fine. He was not entirely fine, but he was functional, and functional was what the moment required. Victoria called that night late, after 11, and her voice was different from the last call, flatter, more tired. The investor calls were hard, she said. How hard? 2 of them are asking whether I should consider a statement distancing myself from the situation. She said it carefully. From you. He was quiet. I told them no, she said. I want you to know that. But they asked. Yes. He looked at the ceiling of his bedroom, at the crack along the east wall that he'd been meaning to patch since spring. What does your communications team say? A pause. They say that a statement would probably stabilize the investor narrative in the short term. What does a statement look like? It would say that I value my private life, and that any current personal situation is not affecting my professional performance, and that I'm committed to the company's strategic direction. That's not really about me. It's all about you, she said. It just doesn't say your name. And Garrett uses it anyway to make the case that you're distracted. No, if I put out the statement, it's defensive, which plays into his hands regardless. If I don't put out the statement, the investor anxiety continues. She made a sound, not quite a sigh, more the controlled exhale of someone managing their breathing. It's a design trap. So what do? I go to the board meeting on Friday, and I hold my numbers, and I make the case for the company's long-term direction, and I don't let Garrett Cole define what's happening. Her voice steadied as she said it, like she was rebuilding something while she spoke. That's what I do. Can you win Friday? Yes? This time, no, probably. Then win Friday, he said. A short silence. How's Lily? She asked. Good. She found out deep sea fish can produce their own light, and she's been explaining it to everyone within range. Bioluminescence, Victoria said. It's actually an incredibly efficient energy production mechanism relative to... She's going to want to tell you about it herself. Right. He heard something in her voice that was almost warmth, but was quieter than that. Something more private. Okay. Get some sleep, he said. I'll try. A pause. Ethan, I'm sorry this touched you and Lily. You didn't do anything. It touched you because of me. The distinction matters to me even if it doesn't change the outcome. He thought about Garrett Cole's smile on that Sacramento sidewalk, the way he'd said take care of her as he walked away, with the specific ease of someone who had already decided what came next. It's going to be okay, Ethan said. He believed it. He wanted to believe it. Friday's board meeting was in San Francisco, and Victoria didn't call him until after 9 in the evening, and the gap was long enough that he'd done 3 things he'd said he wasn't going to do. Checked the news twice, called Dana, and eaten half a bag of pretzels standing over the kitchen sink. When she called, he stepped out onto the porch and answered on the second ring. How did it go? I held the votes, she said. The governance review failed. Garrett didn't get what he wanted. Good. Yes. She didn't sound the way he'd expected. Relief, he'd thought. Or at least the particular flatness that came after high-pressure things resolved. But her voice was neither of those things. It was something he couldn't immediately read. What else happened? He asked. A pause. After the vote, she said, Garrett made a comment. Off record, technically. In the hallway afterward. Another pause. He said that this wasn't over, that the markets were nervous and the narrative was already built, and that all it would take was one more piece of information in the right place. Ethan stood on the porch in the August night. The air was still warm, even at 9:30. One more piece of information, he said. He's still looking, she said, for something that makes this stick. Something that makes the story not just noise, but a genuine liability question. She paused. He has people looking into the grant applications, into your background, into... She stopped. Into what? Into what I've put into the business. Quieter now. I made a private loan arrangement through a personal holding company for the Heirloom Valley infrastructure cost. It was structured cleanly. It's not improper, but if he frames it as a CEO, using company-adjacent resources to fund her boyfriend's failing business, Ethan stood very still. Did you? He asked. Use company resources. No. Immediate. The holding company is personal, nothing to do with Sinclair's balance sheet. A pause. But the distinction requires explaining, and explanations in this kind of narrative are, they become the story. He thought about what she'd done. She'd given him money, essentially, through a vehicle that kept it clean on paper, but that had the same practical effect. She'd done it without telling him, and he hadn't known to ask because he hadn't known to look. He turned that over. Why didn't you tell me? He asked. Because you would have said no. Yes, he said. I would have said no. Silence. It wasn't charity, she said. The return structure is real. I'm not a good person who does kind things for people, Ethan. I'm a business person who makes calculated decisions, and sometimes those decisions involve people I... She stopped. It was a sound investment. I believed in the operation. That's not the point, he said. I know. Quieter. I know it's not the point. He sat down on the porch step, the repaired railing at his back, the warm dark in front of him. He thought about autonomy, which he'd been protecting for 2 years. which was maybe the thing he'd built the ranch around. The insistence on doing it himself and getting there himself, because the getting there was what proved the thing was real. He thought about how he'd felt when the grant letter came in, the specific quality of that feeling, which was clean and unqualified, something that was entirely his. He thought about what it would mean if part of it had been subsidized without his knowing. "Are the grant applications real?" he asked. "Completely. I didn't touch those." Her voice was careful. "The Heirloom Valley contract is your work. Renata connected you, but she'd have talked to anyone I referred. You made that case yourself. But the infrastructure costs were mine. Yes." He was quiet for a while. "I'm not angry at you," he said finally. "I think you are, little. He stopped. "I'm trying to figure out how angry to be and whether the anger is accurate." "That's a very you thing to say." "Is it?" "Yes." She paused. "I should have told you. I knew you'd say no, and I thought I knew better, and that is the exact kind of arrogance I'm supposed to have outgrown." Another pause. "I'm sorry." He listened to her be sorry. He thought about all the ways she'd been careful, the conditions she'd set, the honesty she'd asked for, the way she'd crouched down to look at Lily at eye level. He thought about a person who had spent years in rooms where everyone wanted something from her, learning to give people things without announcing it because announcing it felt like vulnerability. "Okay," he said. "Okay? We'll figure out the legal structure later. What matters now is Garrett." He paused. "If he finds the holding company arrangement, what does he do with it?" "Leaks it to the same outlets he used before. Frames it as the CEO, diverting personal resources to subsidize a relationship and creating a conflict of interest story." "Is it a conflict of interest?" "Technically, no. Practically, it's complicated enough to be used. So he takes it to the press and the investors go nervous again. And this time the board doesn't hold," she said. "This time Garrett has a specific financial narrative instead of just a soft distraction story." Ethan turned the situation over the way he turned problems that required actual thinking, without rushing, without looking for the easy exit. "How much time do you have before he finds it?" he asked. "I don't know. Days, maybe. A week." He's methodical, but not fast. "Then you need to move first," Ethan said. "Whatever you're going to do, you do it before he does it to you." "That's what I've been thinking." Her voice was different now. The board meeting voice, the clear and operational thing. "But I don't have—" She stopped. "I don't have a clean move. Every option has a cost." A pause. "There's a shareholder meeting in 6 weeks. It was already scheduled, quarterly. If I wait for that, he won't wait." "No." She was quiet. "No, he won't wait." That. The second story broke the following Tuesday. This time it was more specific. A financial blog that covered tech sector governance ran a piece about the personal loan arrangement, structured more or less accurately, framed more or less precisely the way Victoria had described Garrett would frame it. The headline was measured and careful and clinical in the way that was more damaging than sensationalism. Questions emerge about Sinclair Tech. CEO's personal financial entanglements. By midday, it had been picked up by 2 major financial outlets. By afternoon, one of the neutral board members who Victoria had considered secured called her directly to express his concern. By evening, the social media layer had simplified the whole thing into 5 words. Billionaire CEO funding boyfriend's ranch. Ethan's phone started getting calls from numbers he didn't recognize. He let them go to voicemail. His neighbor Tom, who farmed the adjacent property and had never once commented on Ethan's personal life, stopped by in the afternoon to ask, with careful awkwardness, if everything was all right, and to mention that there were people parked on the county road outside who might be from the press. Lily came home from school that day having heard things from 2 different classmates. She didn't bring it up at dinner. She ate her food and was quieter than usual. And when Ethan asked if she was okay, she said yes in the flat tone she used when yes was not quite the accurate answer. After dinner, she found him on the porch. "People at school were talking," she said. She sat on the step beside him, her knees pulled up. "About Victoria." "I know." "They said bad things." "People say bad things about people they don't know," he said. "It doesn't mean the things are true." "I know." She was quiet. "I told Sophie that Victoria was smart, And she didn't care about money the way they said. And Sophie said, "How do you know?" And I said, "Because she knows about bioluminescence." Ethan looked at his daughter. "That's a good argument," he said. Sophie didn't think so. Lily picked at the edge of her shoelace. "Is Victoria going to be okay?" "She's working on it." "Is she going to stop coming here because of the people saying things?" He looked at his daughter's face, which was turned slightly away, carefully arranged into the expression she used when she was asking something that mattered more than she wanted it to show. "No," he said. "She's not going to stop coming here." Lily nodded, and the careful arrangement eased. Victoria called at 10 that night. "3 investor calls today," she said. "All 3 want reassurance I can't give them right now. Can you give it to them after the shareholder meeting?" "If I handle the meeting right, yes." A pause. "My communications director says I should consider—" She stopped. "Consider what?" "Making a statement." Her voice was flat. "About you. About the situation." "What kind of statement?" "One that creates distance." She said it the way someone says a thing they've been carrying for a while and have decided to put down. "Not that I'm ending anything, just that the situation is contained, that it's not affecting my judgment." He sat with that. "Would it work?" he asked. "For the investors, probably. For the board, maybe. For Garrett." She made a sound. "No. For Garrett, it would be confirmation that pressure works. It would accelerate what he's doing. So it doesn't actually help you. It helps the short-term story. It doesn't help the actual problem. Then don't do it." "Ethan, I'm not telling you what to do," he said carefully. "I'm saying if it doesn't solve the problem, it's just a cost." She was quiet. When she spoke again, her voice was stripped down in the way it got when she was tired past the point of managing how she sounded. "I'm worried about what Garrett's next move is. He has something else. I can feel it." "What else could he have?" "I don't know. That's what worries me." A pause. "He had the financial story ready to go the moment he found the holding company, which means he's been building a sequence. This isn't the last piece." Ethan thought about Garrett Cole on the Sacramento sidewalk. The precision of that encounter, the specific quality of his attention, not just assessing Ethan, but taking an inventory, a professional inventory. "He's building a timeline," Ethan said. "He's going to put it in front of the board in a sequence that builds to something." "Yes. What's the thing that would actually finish it?" She was quiet long enough that he knew she'd thought about this. "If he can demonstrate that my personal situation has compromised a specific business decision," she said, "not just general distraction, a specific case where I made a call that benefited someone I'm personally involved with." "The grant applications," Ethan said. "If the county grants come through." "Yes." Her voice was very controlled. "He'd argue that I influenced a public grant process to benefit a private individual I'm in a relationship with. It's not true. I had no contact with the county grant office. But the perception would be enough." "For the board?" "Yes. Probably." She paused. "I should have thought about this earlier, before I connected you with Renata." He sat on the porch in the warm August night and thought about the grant application he'd spent 3 evenings completing, with the detailed projections and the operational plan, the thing that had felt entirely his because he'd done the work of it himself. He thought about how clean that feeling had been. "I want to withdraw the application," he said. "No." Immediate. "Victoria, no, you earned that application. The work is real. I'm not letting Garrett Cole take that from you. If the grant comes through and he uses it, then I'll deal with that when it happens." Her voice had the board meeting quality again, the hard operational edge. "I'm not going to start making decisions about your life in order to manage his narrative. That's how he wins." Ethan leaned back against the repaired railing. Above him, the stars were very clear, very dense, the particular summer sky that he'd been looking at for 2 years from this exact porch, which was the thing he'd built. "Victoria," he said, "what do you actually want to do? Not the smart move, not the board strategy. What do you want?" Silence. "I want to go to the shareholder meeting," she said slowly. "I want to present the 5-year plan that I've been developing for 2 years And that is a better argument for this company's future than anything Garrett Cole's fund has. I want to present it to the people who own this company and let them decide. She paused. And I want to expose what Garrett has been doing because it's manipulative and it's damaging, and it's the kind of thing that deserves daylight. Then do that. The timeline is the problem. The shareholder meeting is 6 weeks away. He's not going to move the meeting, Ethan said. A pause. I can't just move. Can you call a special meeting? Silence. He could hear her thinking. I'm the largest shareholder, she said slowly. I can call a special meeting with 48 hours notice under the company bylaws. It's not unheard of. It would be aggressive. Would it be premature? Do you have what you need? I have most of what I need. Her voice was different now, the quality that came when she was seeing the shape of something. I need 2 more days of documentation. I've been pulling everything Garrett has touched for the past 6 months. There's a pattern in it. The timing of the leaks, the intermediaries he used. I can't prove he's the source yet, but I'm close. How close? 1 thread, she said. 1 more thread, and I have it. A pause. Ethan, if I call this meeting, it's big, he said. It's the biggest thing I've done since I took the chair. She paused. If it goes wrong, will it go wrong? I don't think so. Quieter. I haven't been wrong yet. Then trust that. She was quiet for a long time. He listened to the silence between them, the particular quality of 2 people sitting in the same thought from different places. I need 2 days, she said. Can you? I need to know you're all right. For 2 days I can't. I'm all right, he said. Lily's all right. The ranch is fine. Do what you need to do. 2 days, she said. 2 days, he confirmed. They stayed on the line for another minute without speaking, which was a thing they'd learned how to do. The silence that was company rather than absence. Then she said goodnight, and he said goodnight, and the call ended. He sat on the porch for a while in the dark. He thought about the sequence Garrett Cole was building, and the story he was assembling piece by piece, and the way that every piece was technically accurate and built towards something that was fundamentally untrue. He thought about how a lie could be constructed entirely from facts if you chose the right facts in the right order. He thought about what it would mean to have the narrative taken from you, and whether you could build a counter-narrative that was just truer, just realer, just more actually what happened. He thought about Victoria in San Francisco, working through the night with the particular intensity she brought to things that mattered, pulling at the one remaining thread. He thought about Lily, asleep down the hall, who had defended Victoria to her classmates using bioluminescence as evidence of character. He thought about his porch railing, which was finally fixed. He went inside and locked the door and went to bed, and slept the way a person sleeps when they've committed to something and are waiting for the morning. The 2 days Victoria asked for became 3, and then 4, and Ethan understood without being told that the thread she'd been pulling had led somewhere more complicated than she'd expected. She texted him in fragments. Short messages sent at odd hours. The kind of communication that happened when someone was working through something and needed the act of reaching out without the bandwidth for an actual conversation. Still working. You okay? Fine. Lily made the soccer team. She's very loud about it. Tell her I said congratulations. She'll want you to tell her yourself. A pause of several hours. Then, I know. He fed the chickens and checked the tomatoes and drove Lily to her first soccer practice and stood on the sideline in the heat, watching her run with the specific joy of a child who has just discovered something her body is good at. And he thought about Victoria in San Francisco pulling at a thread. And he thought about Garrett Cole, who had built something deliberately and patiently and with the confidence of a man who believed he understood how things ended. On the 4th day, Dana drove out to the ranch uninvited, which meant she was worried about something she didn't want to discuss on the phone. She arrived at noon and found him in the equipment shed doing maintenance on the irrigation pump, and she sat on an overturned bucket and watched him work for about 2 minutes before she said anything. Mom called me this morning, she said. Okay. She saw the articles. I figured she would eventually. She's worried about Lily. Dana paused. She's also worried about you, but she leads with Lily because she thinks you'll engage with that more. She's not wrong. He kept working. Lily's fine. She made the soccer team. I know, she texted me 17 times about it. Dana was quiet for a moment. Are you fine? I'm functional. That's not the same thing. I know, it's what I've got right now. He looked at her. What does Mom actually want to say? Dana turned the bucket slightly, which was her tell for when she was about to say something she'd been delegated to say. She wants to know if Victoria is worth it. What's happening? Tell her yes. That's it? Just yes? What else is there to say? He set the wrench down and looked at his sister properly. I know how it looks. A woman in her position, with everything she's dealing with, and I'm a guy with 16 acres and a chicken problem. I know how the narrative reads. That's not what Mom is saying. It's what the articles are saying. Mom doesn't care about the articles. Dana's voice was careful and direct, the way it got when she was being deliberately honest. She cares that you came back to life this summer, and she doesn't want to watch you lose it. He picked up the wrench again, turned it over in his hand. She's worth it, he said. That's the whole answer. Dana nodded. She sat on the bucket for another few minutes without pushing further, which was the best thing she could have done. Then she helped him carry a section of pipe that was too heavy for one person, and they worked together for an hour in the heat without talking about anything significant. And when she left, she hugged him in the short way she had, fast and tight, done before he could comment on it, and drove away. Victoria found the thread on the 5th day. She called him at 7 in the morning, which was earlier than her usual, and her voice had the quality it sometimes got when she'd been working through the night and had arrived at something. I have it, she said. He was on his second coffee. Outside the kitchen window, the morning was pale gold, the valley still cool before the heat settled in. Tell me. Garrett used a financial PR firm as his intermediary. The firm has 2 clients that are also Garrett's funds portfolio companies. The timing of the leak to the first outlet matches internal communications I found in our server logs. Someone on the board side accessed a file containing the holding company documentation 2 days before the first story ran. She paused. It's not a direct line, but it's close enough that when I put it next to the pattern of the other leaks, the timing, the specific details that only came from board-level access, it builds a case. Strong enough? Strong enough for the shareholders to understand what's been happening. Another pause. Not strong enough for a lawsuit. Not yet. But I'm not trying to win a lawsuit. I'm trying to show the people who own this company what their board member has been doing. When? I'm calling the special meeting today, 48 hours notice. That puts it Thursday morning. Her voice was steady, with the particular steadiness of a decision that's been made past the point of second guessing. I'm sending the notice in an hour. What happens after you send it? Garrett will know immediately. He'll try to move faster than I can. A pause. He has a third piece. I've been working on the assumption that he has one more thing, and I haven't been able to find what it is. If he deploys it between now and Thursday morning, then you deal with it Thursday morning, Ethan said. You deal with what's in front of you. I know. She was quiet. I know that's right. Is there anything I can do? No. Then, yes, actually, don't. If anyone contacts you from press or anyone claiming to be an investor, don't say anything. Nothing. Just say no comment. I can do that. I mean it. Garrett may try to get to you through intermediaries. He may try to manufacture a statement. Victoria, I'm not going to talk to anyone. I know. She stopped. I know. There was something in her voice that was underneath the operational clarity, something that came from not sleeping and from carrying something heavy and from knowing that what happened in the next 48 hours was going to determine something important. Hey, he said. Yeah. You've run that company for 4 years. You've made it stronger. Whatever he says about you on Thursday, that's still true. Silence. Yeah, she said, more quietly. You've got this. A pause. I'll call you Thursday. After. I'll be here. He didn't hear from her Wednesday. He hadn't expected to, but he'd been prepared for something. A text, at minimum. There was nothing. He resisted the impulse to reach out and ask, because she was 48 hours from the most important professional moment of her life, and she didn't need him adding weight to the conversation. Lily noticed he was distracted at dinner on Wednesday. "Are you worried about her?" she asked, with the uncomplicated directness she aimed at the center of things. "A little," he said, which was an understatement, but 8-year-olds didn't require the full accounting. "She's going to be okay," Lily said. "She's really smart." She considered this. Smarter than most people. "Yes," he agreed. "Sophie's mom said she saw a thing on TV about her." Lily's tone indicated that Sophie's mom had said other things that Lily had chosen not to repeat. "I didn't watch it." "Good. I told Sophie's mom that Victoria was our friend and friends don't watch bad things on TV about their friends." He looked at his daughter. "How did Sophie's mom take that?" "She looked weird." Lily ate a bite of her food. "I don't think she agreed." "You still said the right thing." Lily shrugged with the ease of someone who wasn't looking for validation because she'd already arrived at her own conclusion. "I know." Thursday morning, he woke at 5:30 as always, fed the chickens, drank his coffee on the porch, and waited. The special shareholder meeting was at 10 a.m. Pacific. He knew this because he'd looked it up. Sinclair Technologies' special meetings were publicly noticed, which meant the financial press had picked up on it the moment Victoria had filed the notice. The coverage of the notice itself had been pointed. Sinclair Tech, CEO, calls emergency shareholder meeting amid governance concerns. What does she know? He didn't watch the live stream. He thought about it. The meeting was publicly broadcast, standard practice for a company of that size, but decided against it. This was Victoria's thing, in Victoria's world, and he was not going to watch it the way someone watches a thing that is happening to them. He was going to wait. He worked. Checked the tomatoes. Fixed a section of fence on the east side that Tom from next door had flagged the week before. Ate lunch standing at the counter. A sandwich, over the sink, which his mother would have had opinions about. At 12:40, his phone lit up with Dana's name. "Are you watching?" Dana said, without hello. "No." "Ethan." Her voice had something in it he couldn't place. "You should probably watch." He found the live stream on his phone. It was still running, because the meeting had apparently been going for almost 3 hours. He sat down at the kitchen table and started it. The image was a large boardroom. Sinclair Technologies headquarters in San Francisco, glass and clean lines, and the particular aesthetic of tech company power. The room was full. Not just board members, shareholders, institutional investors, press cameras along the back wall. More people than he'd expected. Victoria was standing at the front of the room. She wasn't behind a podium. She was just standing there with a presentation on the screen behind her and a microphone and the full attention of the room. She was wearing a charcoal jacket. Her hair was back. She looked, from the outside, like she'd had 8 hours of sleep and a calm morning, which he knew was almost certainly not true. She was mid-sentence when he tuned in. Her voice was even and clear, the board meeting quality at its fullest. Not cold, but precise, the kind of precision that meant she was holding something at the very edge of its tightest focus. The pattern of information release is consistent across 4 events between June and August of this year, she was saying. In each case, board-level documentation was accessed through a credentialed user in the 48 to 72-hour window preceding a media leak. In each case, the leaked information appeared in outlets connected to the same financial PR firm. She advanced the slide. "I am not making an accusation in this room. I am presenting a documented timeline and asking this room to draw its own conclusions." Garrett Cole was somewhere in Ethan's peripheral frame. He caught a flash of him, seated near the front, his expression the particular controlled blankness of someone who is prepared for a difficult meeting. He looked like he was waiting for something. He was. Victoria reached the end of the documentation section and paused. Not the pause of someone losing their place, the pause of someone choosing a gear change deliberately. "I want to address something directly," she said, "because I believe this room deserves directness." She looked out at the assembled people with the steadiness that he'd come to understand was not absence of feeling, but management of it, something she'd been practicing since she was very young, probably. "There's been a significant amount of coverage over the past several weeks about my personal life. About who I spend time with and where, and what that means about my fitness to lead this company. The room was very quiet. "I'm not going to defend my personal life," she said. "It's mine. What I'm going to tell you is this. The suggestion that I am distracted from this company's interests is false. The 5-year strategic plan I'm presenting to you today is the most detailed and comprehensive document I've produced since I took this chair. The revenue numbers for the past 2 quarters are on slide 14. They speak for themselves." She paused. "What I have been is human, and I make no apology for that." Someone in the room shifted. Someone coughed. The particular sounds of a group of people processing something they hadn't expected. Garrett Cole moved. He stood, smoothly, with the ease of someone who had prepared this moment, and his voice came through clearly when he spoke. "Ms. Sinclair, with respect," he said, "the board's concern has never been about your personal life in isolation. It's been about a pattern of decisions that suggest your professional judgment has been compromised by personal entanglement." He was measured and calm. Specifically, the question of whether a personal financial arrangement with a private individual who subsequently benefited from your professional network connections represents a conflict of interest. The room had shifted again, tighter. Victoria looked at him. Just looked at him for a moment, with the measuring quality that Ethan knew, that calibrating thing, except now it had an edge to it. "You're referring to my personal investment in a small agricultural operation in the Sacramento Valley," she said. "I'm referring to a pattern that includes that investment, yes. The investment is from a personal holding company with no connection to Sinclair's balance sheet. It has been reviewed by my personal attorneys. It is legal and proper." Her voice was even. "I'll also note that the individual in question declined to use my name in any professional context. He applied for public county grants through the standard application process with no contact with my office. He joined a regional agriculture network through an introduction that I made and that he followed up entirely on his own." She paused. "He turned down a significantly more lucrative arrangement from a separate investor group because he didn't think it served his long-term interests. He did that before I knew the arrangement existed." A beat of silence. "What I would ask this room," she said, "is why this particular line of information has been so aggressively surfaced at this particular moment. And I would point you to slide 23. She advanced to slide 23. It was the timeline, the document access logs, the PR firm connections, the sequence of leaks. She didn't name Garrett. She laid the evidence in front of the room and let the room sit with it. Garrett Cole's composure held. He was good enough for his composure to hold. But something in the set of his shoulders had shifted. Something that Ethan caught even through a phone screen in a kitchen in Crestfield. The third piece, the thing Victoria had been afraid Garrett was holding, came 40 minutes later. He deployed it the way he'd deployed everything, measured, seemingly procedural, buried in emotion. He moved for a formal governance review of the CEO's compensation and benefit structure, which was a standard enough motion to be unobjectionable on its face. The supporting documentation he submitted with the motion contained, buried in an appendix, a description of a private charter flight that Victoria had taken from San Francisco to Sacramento in early July, which had been paid through a company expense account as a business travel expense. The destination, Garrett said calmly, was not a business meeting. Flight records and the CEO's own calendar for that date show no scheduled business activity in Sacramento. The date corresponds with a personal visit to the Crestfield area. The room went very quiet. Ethan, watching on his phone screen, understood what he was seeing. It wasn't a dramatic revelation. It was a small thing, a single charter flight, a few $1,000s. But in the context Garrett had built, the holding company, the network introductions, the weeks of narrative, it was the piece that turned a pattern into a conclusion. It said, she used company resources for personal purposes. It said, judgment. Victoria stood at the front of the room and looked at the motion in front of her. She didn't look at Garrett. She looked at the assembled shareholders and the board members and the press cameras along the back wall, and she was quiet for a moment. A real moment, not performed, not calculated. He could see it even on the small screen. She was deciding something. When she spoke, her voice was different, still clear, still carrying, but the board meeting quality had dropped off it. It was just her voice. The flight was a personal visit, she said. That's correct. I should not have run it through the company expense account. I will reimburse that cost today, in full, and I will ensure that my expense reports are reviewed by an independent committee going forward. She paused. I made a mistake. I'm not going to pretend I didn't. The room held very still. I am also going to say, she continued, that this mistake, a charter flight incorrectly expensed, is the single actual instance of corporate resource misuse that has been documented in 4 years of my tenure. The documentation on slide 23 shows a coordinated effort to surface this information at a moment specifically designed to create maximum damage. She looked across the room. You can decide what that means. She sat down. The vote that followed was not the dramatic reversal of a movie. It was messy and procedural and required 3 separate motions and a recess during which Ethan watched the live stream cut to a holding screen and sat in his kitchen not knowing what was happening. He called Dana. Are you watching? He asked. I've been watching for 2 hours, she said. She's incredible. Is she winning? I don't know yet. They went into a closed session. Dana paused. The flight thing was bad. I could see it land. She admitted it immediately. I know, which helped. But Garrett, Ethan, he's very good at what he does. He made 4 years of clean work look like it was leading to that one flight. He put the phone down and waited. The live stream came back at 2:17 in the afternoon. The board was reassembled. Victoria was back at the front of the room, but she was seated now, at the table, which was different. The board chair, an older man named Harrison Briggs, who had been on the company since Victoria's father's time, spoke the outcome. The governance review motion had passed. There would be an independent audit of executive expenses. There would be new guidelines for conflict of interest disclosure. There would be a review period. Victoria remained as CEO. The vote on the underlying no confidence motion, the one Garrett had been building toward, had failed. 7-4. She had held her numbers. Barely. But she had held them. Ethan let out a breath he'd been holding for about 40 minutes. He watched her receive the outcome. She nodded, said something brief he couldn't hear clearly. She looked. He tried to read her from across the phone screen, like someone who had won a version of something and understood exactly what it had cost. She called him at 6 that evening. He was on the porch. The sun was going down behind the western hills, the sky going through the colors it did in late August. Amber to rose to the particular deep blue that came before dark. Lily was inside watching something. Biscuit, who had been at the ranch for the day because Dana had needed someone to watch him, was lying on the porch step being useless. I saw it, Ethan said when he picked up. I know. Her voice was tired in a way that was past performance, just tired. The reimbursement went through this afternoon. Briggs called personally to say it was handled. He seems decent. He is. He was my father's first board appointment. She paused. He voted for me. Of course he did. It wasn't of course, Ethan. The flight was real. I expensed it, and I shouldn't have, and he could have used that to go the other way. But he didn't. No. Silence. Biscuit made a small sound in his sleep that was either contentment or a dream about something alarming. Are you okay? He asked. I'm sitting in my office, she said. Everyone else went home. I've been sitting here for an hour because I couldn't figure out where to go. He didn't say anything to that. He waited. The flight, she said. I should tell you, it was the second time I came up, the Saturday in early July, when Lily and I did the chalk thing. She paused. I'd had a terrible board call that morning, and I just got in the plane. I told myself it was a business trip. I knew it wasn't. Okay. I shouldn't have used the company account. I knew that when I did it. I did it anyway because it was easier than thinking about what I was actually doing. What were you actually doing? A pause. Coming to see you, she said simply. Because I wanted to. She said it like something she was setting down finally. That's all. I just wanted to. He looked out at the fields going dark at the edges. Victoria, he said. Yeah. Come out here. A beat. Ethan? Not tonight, you're exhausted. This weekend. Come out here and stay. Not the hotel, the ranch. He paused. Lily's been saving the good chair at the table for 2 weeks. It seems wasteful. Silence. He could hear her breathing. "The board is going to be watching everything I do," she said. "The independent review. The optics of—" "I know. It won't be simple. I know that too. I made a mistake and it landed in front of 200 people and press cameras." She said it flatly, like she was recounting something she needed to say out loud to process it. "Yes," he said, "you did. And you stood up in front of all of them and said so. And then you kept going." He paused. "That's not nothing, Victoria." Very quiet. "Come this weekend," he said. "We'll fix the thing. There's a section of fence on the east side that I could use another person for." She made the sound that was her version of laughing, quieter than usual, more tired. "Okay," she said. She came Saturday morning. She drove herself, same as always, and she parked on the gravel and got out, and she looked different in a way he couldn't immediately name. Not worse, just stripped of something, like she'd taken off a layer. She was in jeans and a plain shirt, and her hair was down, and she stood by the car for a moment looking at the ranch with the expression she'd had the very first time she'd come, that first Thursday, like she was taking inventory of something that made sense to her. Lily heard the car from inside and came out the door at full speed, skipping the porch steps entirely, and hit Victoria at the hip like a small freight train. Victoria's arms went around her automatically. She held on for a second longer than she needed to, which Ethan noticed from across the yard. "You came back," Lily said, like this was a fact that required announcement. "I said I would," Victoria said. "You didn't come for 2 weeks." "I know. I was working on something hard." "Did you fix it?" Lily pulled back to look at her face with direct, uncomplicated inquiry. "Mostly," Victoria said. "Not all the way, but mostly." Lily appeared to find this satisfactory. "We have a fence section that Dad says needs 2 people. I told him I could help, but he said I wasn't big enough, and I said that was unfair." "You're definitely big enough," Victoria said, with the absolute seriousness she brought to Lily's positions. "Your dad underestimates you." "That's what I said." Lily took her hand and started pulling her toward the yard. Ethan met them halfway. He and Victoria looked at each other over Lily's head for a moment. Just looked, the way you look at someone when there's too much to say and none of it needs saying immediately. "Hi," she said. "Hi," he said. Lily was already explaining the fence situation in detailed operational terms. They followed her. But they worked the fence in the afternoon. It was the east section, where the posts had shifted over the winter and the wire had gone loose in 3 places, and it was genuinely a 2-adult job for the stretching portions. Victoria worked without complaint in the heat, and she was better at it than he expected, and when he said so, she gave him the look that meant she found the expectation mildly insulting. "I told you, cabin roof. I was 17. Your father made you re-roof a cabin at 17? He didn't make me. I wanted to." A pause. He was the kind of man who believed that people should know how things worked, not just how to direct other people who knew how things worked. She stretched a section of wire and held it while he secured it. He was right about most things. What was he wrong about? She thought about it. He thought that the company being successful would be enough, that results would be their own argument. She passed him the wire staple. He didn't understand Garrett Cole. He would have, eventually, but he didn't have time. "You understand Garrett Cole?" "Now I do." She moved to the next post. It's not comfortable understanding someone like that. You start to see the moves before they happen, and it's tiring. Knowing how people like that think. Is it over with him? No. She said it without drama. He lost this round. He'll regroup. The independent review will be clean because I run a clean operation, and that'll take away his best remaining tool. But he has the fun position. He's not gone. She looked at the fence line, squinting into the afternoon light. He'll be careful for a while, and then he'll try again differently. What do you do with that? I stay better than him. She shrugged, one shoulder. I've been doing it for 4 years. I know how. He looked at her. She was holding a fence post and wearing work gloves that were slightly too big for her hands, and there was a smear of dirt along her forearm, and she looked nothing like the woman who had stood in front of 200 people and a press camera in a charcoal jacket and said, I made a mistake with her chin level. She looked like both of those things at once, actually. That was the thing he was still getting used to. How much of her there was, and how long it took to see the different layers of it, and how the ones you found later were not surprises exactly, but confirmations, things that made sense of things you'd already seen. What? She said, because he'd been quiet a beat too long. Nothing, he said. Hand me the next staple. She handed it over with a look that said she knew he wasn't telling her nothing and let it go. Well, the evening settled the way evenings did in August. Slowly, with the heat easing in degrees rather than all at once, the light going through the long golden phase before it finally gave in to dark. Lily had soccer homework, which was a thing that apparently existed, a drill video she was supposed to watch and practice in the yard, which she did with intense concentration for 11 minutes and then with progressively creative interpretation of the instructions. Ethan made dinner. Victoria sat on the repaired porch railing, not leaning, just sitting on the edge of it, watching Lily do her own version of the soccer drill in the yard. And they talked through the kitchen window the way people talk when one of them is cooking and one of them is outside, in fragments, comfortable with the gaps. The grant came through, he said, partway through. A pause from the porch. Which one? The county one. Letter came Thursday. I didn't say anything because of the meeting. Ethan, that's significant. I know. He stirred something on the stove. The Heirloom Valley delivery went well this week, too. They want to expand the contract for spring, double the volume. That's what you were working toward. Yeah, he paused. The math is working. For the first time since I bought this place, the math actually works. She was quiet for a moment. He looked out the window and she was watching Lily, who had abandoned the soccer drill entirely and was now involved in an elaborate solo game with a stick and the corner fence post. I keep thinking about what Garrett said, Victoria said, in the meeting, about my judgment being compromised. He waited. I don't think he's right, she said, but I've been asking myself whether he's a little bit right, whether coming out here as much as I have, whether that's been... She stopped. A mistake? A distraction from things I should have been more focused on. He finished what he was doing at the stove and came to lean in the doorway, looking at her on the railing. Did anything fall apart? He asked. At the company, while you were coming out here. No. Is the 5-year plan you presented on Thursday the most detailed document you've produced in 4 years? She looked at him. Yes. So your judgment was compromised in a way that made the work better. She was quiet. I'm not saying Garrett Cole didn't find a real thing, he said carefully. The flight was a real mistake. You owned it. That's done. He paused. But the idea that caring about something outside the company ruins the work. I don't buy that. I think it's what Garrett wants you to believe because it's easier to control someone who's isolated. She looked at him for a long moment with the measuring thing, and then it shifted into something else. Something that was not quite emotion but was adjacent to it, the territory right beside it. You should have been a strategist, she said. I'm a farmer. You're a farmer who thinks like a strategist. I think like a person who has had 2 years to figure out what matters, he said. That's all. She looked back at Lily, who was now talking to the fence post, apparently explaining the rules of her game to it. What matters? Victoria said quietly. Not a question. More like she was trying the phrase out, seeing how it fit. Dinner was the 3 of them at the kitchen table, and Lily talked almost entirely about the soccer team and a girl named Jordan who was very fast and whom Lily had decided was her primary competitive concern. And Victoria listened and asked questions and at one point said, "What does Jordan do with her left foot?" which made Lily look at her with sudden intense focus and say, "I don't know. I have to watch for that." Like this was information she would be filing and acting on. After dinner, Lily helped clear the table in the perfunctory way that meant she'd done it enough times for it to be automatic. And then she disappeared upstairs because she had what she described as research to do, which meant she'd be looking up something about either deep-sea creatures or soccer tactics, or some intersection of the two that only made sense to her. Ethan poured coffee. Victoria sat at the table with hers and was quiet, in the way that meant she was thinking about something specific. I've been thinking about the IPO push, she said eventually. About what I actually want. And? I want to do it on my terms. She looked at the coffee mug. Not Garrett's timeline, not his framing. My father built something that was supposed to last. An IPO isn't inherently wrong for that. It's about whether you go in with the right structure and the right controls, or whether you let the fund pressure shape it. Can you shape it yourself? If I move first, if I set the terms before Garrett builds another push. She paused. I've been avoiding the IPO conversation because it felt like giving him what he wanted, but avoiding it just meant he got to own the narrative around it. She looked up at him. I should have been building my own case for it instead of defending against his. So build it. It's a lot of work. You work a lot. She almost smiled. I need to be more present at the company. The next few months, the independent review, the governance restructuring, I need to be visible and consistent. She looked at him. I won't be out here as much. I know, he said. Lily? I'll talk to Lily. He paused. She's 8, not fragile. She understands that people have work. She's more perceptive than 8. She is, he agreed, which is why she'll understand. Victoria looked at him. I'm not going anywhere, she said. It was the most direct she'd been about the architecture of what they were, and she said it without hedging it. I know, he said. She stopped. Tried again. I'm not good at this. At letting things be what they are without managing them. You're better than you think. I put us in a board meeting, she said. I am literally the reason your name was in a national financial publication next to the word broke. I am actually not broke anymore. The math works now. She looked at him with the expression that was her version of laughing when she didn't quite get there. You're very annoying, she said. You said that once before, he said. I think what you mean is that I'm difficult to catastrophize around. She looked at him. That's exactly what I mean, she said. And it's both helpful and frustrating. He reached across the table and took her hand, the way he had that first time on the porch. Not as a gesture, just because it made sense to. She looked down at their hands and then back up at him. The fence is fixed, he said. I noticed. You helped. I did. You're also better at chicken coop roofs than you led me to believe. I never said I wasn't good at roofs. Fair point. He paused. Stay tonight. The guest room. No pressure. Lily will be ecstatic, and it'll be good for her to see that things are normal. He paused. They are normal. This is just normal. She looked at him with the measuring quality, and then she looked around the kitchen, the table, the chairs, the window with the evening dark outside, the ordinary and particular shape of his life in this room. And whatever she was calibrating landed somewhere that made her shoulders settle slightly. Okay, she said. Okay. I'm not good at slowing down, she said, in case you hadn't noticed. I'd noticed, he said. I'm not asking you to slow down, just stop here for a night before you speed up again. She looked at him. Something moved across her face that was not performed and not managed. Just the real thing, whatever it was, moving across her face because she'd stopped holding it entirely still. Okay, she said again. Quieter. Lily appeared at the top of the stairs. Victoria, are you staying? She called down. Because if you are, I can show you the research I did about Jordan's left foot, and you can help me make a plan. Victoria looked up at the stairs, then at Ethan, something in her expression that he was learning to read, the thing that came when Lily surprised her into being unguarded. Yeah, she called back up. Come show me! Lily thundered down the stairs. The kitchen filled with noise, the particular noise of a child who has found an audience for something she is very certain about. And Ethan sat at the table and drank his coffee and watched the two of them spread a notepad across the table and start drawing what appeared to be a tactical diagram of a third-grade soccer field, and the stone behind his sternum that he'd been carrying for 3 years did the thing it had been doing all summer. Not disappearing, not lifting, just changing. Settling into something different, something that was less like weight and more like foundation. Outside, the August night moved over the valley, warm and dark and ordinary, and the ranch was quiet in the way of a place that has work to do tomorrow, but is, right now, finished with today. September came in quieter than August, the way seasons sometimes do, not with a visible change, but with a shift in quality, the heat losing its aggression, the mornings arriving with something cooler at their edges that you felt before you understood what it meant. Victoria had told him she'd be less present, and she was. The week after she stayed at the ranch, she drove back to San Francisco early Sunday morning, and the calls that week were shorter, the texts more functional, the language of someone whose attention was genuinely stretched across too many things. He understood this. He'd told her he understood this. Understanding didn't make the kitchen table feel less like it had extra space at it, but that was a thing he kept to himself because it wasn't useful information. Lily was less private about it. She's been busy, Lily said one evening, about 10 days after Victoria's overnight stay, in the tone of someone reporting a fact she had opinions about, but was choosing to state neutrally. She's got a lot happening at work, Ethan said. I know. Lily moved her fork around her plate. I'm not complaining. You're complaining a little. I'm noting, Lily said with dignity. There's a difference. He looked at his daughter, who was 8 years old and could construct a tactical soccer diagram and argue about bioluminescence, and understood the word noting in the sense she was using it, and felt the thing he always felt when he looked at her closely, a complicated love that had no adequate description, shot through with the awareness that she was going to be extraordinary, and the separate awareness that extraordinary people got there through hard things, and the hope that the hard things would be proportionate. She's coming back, he said. When? I don't know exactly. When she can. Lily looked at him. Do you miss her? He considered lying, then didn't. Yeah, he said. A little. Lily nodded, satisfied with this honesty. Me too, she said. A little. Then she went back to her food, and the subject was closed in the way only children could close subjects, completely, without residue. The independent governance review at Sinclair Technologies ran through September and into early October. Victoria had told him what to expect: a third-party auditor, 6 weeks of examination of the past 4 years of executive decisions, expense reports, conflict of interest disclosures. She'd said it with the calm of someone who was not worried about the outcome, because the outcome was going to be fine, and she'd been right. The audit came back in the first week of October with a finding of no material violations of fiduciary duty, one noted instance of improper expense classification, the charter flight, already reimbursed, and a set of recommended process improvements that Victoria had, in fact, already been implementing. She called him the evening the audit results were released. Clean, she said. I know, I read it. A pause. You've been following the filings. You're in my life, he said. Your company is in your life. It follows. Most people don't read SEC governance audit reports voluntarily. Most people don't have a reason to. He paused. How did Garrett take it? With his face very still and his comments very measured. She paused. He moved an amendment at today's board meeting. A small one. Process-related, genuinely unobjectionable. He voted with me on it. He's repositioning. Yes. Signaling that he's a constructive voice, not an adversarial one. Building goodwill so the next time he makes a push, it looks less like an attack. Her voice was level. He's going to be doing this for years. And you'll handle it for years. Yes. A pause. I've started building the IPO case. On my terms, the way we talked about. It's going to take 6 months to structure it right. But you're moving. I'm moving. He heard something in her voice that was quiet and slightly surprised at itself. The sound of someone who has made a decision and is discovering that it feels better than the circling did. My father would have done it this way. He just never got to. Ethan sat on his porch, the railing solid under his back, the October evening coming in with the first real chill of the season, and thought about Martin Sinclair, who he'd never met and never would, who had built something and left it to a 23-year-old and expected her to be enough. She had been. She was more than enough. She just hadn't finished learning the difference between surviving and building, and that was taking longer than she'd planned. Victoria, he said. Yeah. Come for Lily's first soccer game. It's Saturday. A pause. Then, what time? 10 in the morning. It's at the school field. She's been practicing the Jordan counter strategy. He heard the shift in her voice that was warmth and amusement and something more careful underneath both. Does the counter strategy involve the left foot? Apparently, Jordan does everything with her right foot, and Lily considers this a strategic gap she intends to exploit. That's actually sound analysis. That's what I said. She told me I was the last person to notice. Victoria made the sound that was her laugh. I'll be there Saturday. There's no pressure, he said. I know you're in the middle of, see, Ethan. Her voice was patient and direct. I want to be there. That's different from pressure. Okay, he said. Okay. She came Friday evening before the game, which meant she was staying the night, which Lily discovered when she heard the car on the gravel and came downstairs at 7 in the evening and stopped at the bottom step and looked at Victoria standing in the entryway with a bag over her shoulder and said, not with the explosion of excitement she usually brought to things, but with something quieter and more serious. You came early. I wanted to see the pre-game preparation, Victoria said. Lily looked at her for a moment with that evaluating seriousness. Then she said, we're doing visualization. You can help. What does that involve? I'll explain while you put your bag away. She led Victoria upstairs without further discussion. Ethan stood in the entryway alone for a moment, listening to Lily's voice explaining visualization techniques, which she had apparently researched because Lily researched things that mattered to her. And then he went to finish making dinner and told himself that this was his life and it was good and he was not going to overthink it. Dinner that night was easier than it had been in weeks. The compressed quality of the past month, the distance, the functional texts, the shorter calls, decompressed over the kitchen table in the particular way that presence did what distance couldn't. Victoria was different in person than she was on the phone. On the phone, she was capable and contained. In person, she was also those things. But there was something that ran alongside them, a quality of attention, of being actually in the room that you couldn't replicate through a speaker. Lily talked about soccer and about a book she was reading about ocean exploration and about a project at school where she had to interview a family member about something they'd learned from a mistake, which she had decided to do with Ethan and which she intended to record on her tablet with what she called a documentary style. I could interview you, she said to Victoria. I get to do 2 if I want extra credit. Victoria looked at her. About a mistake I learned from? Yeah. Lily was matter-of-fact about it. Miss Chen said the best stories come from real things. A pause. Ethan watched Victoria decide something. Okay, Victoria said, set up your tablet. Now? Before I change my mind. Lily got the tablet with a speed that suggested she'd been hoping for this. She set it on the edge of the table and pointed it at Victoria with the seriousness of a child who is committed to a project. Okay, Lily said. What's a mistake you made that you learned something from? Victoria looked into the tablet camera for a moment. Then she looked at Lily instead of the camera, which was the right instinct. I learned that trying to control everything doesn't actually protect you, she said. I used to think if I planned for every possible problem, nothing bad could happen. And then a lot of things happened anyway, and the things I hadn't planned for were the ones that mattered most. She paused. The mistake was thinking that control and safety were the same thing. Lily wrote something on the notepad she'd positioned beside the tablet. What did you learn? That some things are better than safe, Victoria said. Lily wrote that down. Then she looked up. Like what? Victoria glanced at Ethan briefly, just a flash, and then looked back at Lily. Like this, she said simply. Lily looked at her, then at her notepad, then back up. I'm going to use that, she said, with the solemnity of someone making a creative decision. Miss Chen is going to love that. I hope so, Victoria said. Lily clicked the tablet off and picked up her fork. Conversation concluded. Back to dinner because she was 8 and had gotten what she needed and saw no reason to dwell. Ethan looked at Victoria over Lily's head. Victoria looked back. Neither of them said anything. They didn't need to. Doubt. The soccer game on Saturday morning was everything a 9 and under soccer game was. Chaotic, enthusiastic, structurally approximate, and deeply earnest in the way that things are earnest when the people doing them haven't yet learned to be self-conscious about caring. Lily played with the total commitment of someone who had done her research and was now executing a plan. The Jordan counter strategy was deployed in the second half with partial success. Jordan did in fact favor her right foot, and Lily got to the left side of her twice, which produced one genuine shot on goal that the goalkeeper, who was very determined and slightly too large for her age, managed to block with her whole body. Final score? 2-1, Lily's team winning. Lily ran off the field directly to where Ethan and Victoria were standing on the sideline and delivered a detailed, breathless breakdown of everything that had happened, including the moments she thought had been suboptimal and the adjustments she was going to make for the next game. And Victoria listened with the focused attention she brought to things she was actually interested in, and at one point said, "What did Jordan do after you pressured her left twice?" And Lily's eyes went wide because she had not expected this specific follow-up question, and she had to think about it carefully. "She started passing early," Lily said slowly, "before she was ready." "Which means?" "She was nervous about her left side." "Which means you did something real," Victoria said. Lily stood with that for a moment. Then she nodded, once, with the particular satisfaction of someone who has been given information that confirms something she suspected but hadn't been able to articulate. Margaret Mercer was at the game. Ethan's mother, who had come for the game and arrived early, and brought a folding chair and homemade snacks that she'd distributed to other parents on the sideline before Ethan had even noticed she was there. She greeted Victoria with the warmth she always did, which was full and direct and slightly overwhelming. And Victoria received it with the ease she'd developed over the summer, no longer stiffening at the immediacy of it, just meeting it. "You look better than the last time I saw you," Margaret said to Victoria, with the frankness that was simply how she operated. "Thank you," Victoria said. "I had a hard few months." "I know, I watched some of it." Margaret's expression was direct and kind, with no performance in it. "You handled it well." "I made mistakes." "You owned them in front of everyone," Margaret said. "That's not a small thing." She touched Victoria's arm briefly, the way she touched Ethan's arm, matter-of-factly, like contact was a language she used to mean things she didn't always say in words. "Come for Sunday dinner, both of you. We haven't had a proper one since July." "I'd like that," Victoria said. And she meant it. Ethan could tell the difference now between the things she said because they were appropriate and the things she said because they were true. Sunday dinner was loud and overfull, and Roy had a new story about something that had gone wrong on a fishing trip in August, which he told with the enthusiasm of someone who found his own disasters genuinely entertaining. Patricia asked Victoria about the news coverage, and then apologized for asking about the news coverage, and Victoria said it was fine and answered the question with the candor she brought to things she'd already processed. Dana sat across the table from Victoria, and they talked, at length, about a county infrastructure project that Dana was working on, and that turned out to intersect with something Victoria's company had been looking at in the region. And by the end of dinner, they had exchanged numbers and made a plan to have a separate conversation about it, which meant Dana had decided something about Victoria that she hadn't needed to announce because Dana never announced those decisions. On the drive back to the ranch, Lily fell asleep in the back seat before they'd gone 10 minutes, which was what happened when she had a soccer game and a Sunday dinner in the same day. Ethan drove and Victoria looked out the passenger window at the valley dark, and neither of them spoke for a while. "Your family is still the best thing I've encountered in a long time," Victoria said, quietly, so as not to wake Lily. "I know I've said something like that before." "You have. I keep meaning it more." She turned slightly from the window. "What Roy has, this thing where bad things happen to him and he finds them funny, I've been thinking about that a lot." "Roy's version of resilience," Ethan said. "It's different from mine. Mine is armor. I make things not touch me." She paused. "Roy lets them touch him and then laughs about it. It doesn't seem to break him." "He's been doing it his whole life," Ethan said. "I think it's a practice, not a gift." She was quiet, looking at the dark outside. "I'm not naturally like that." "No," he agreed. "But you're better at it than you were in June." She turned to look at him. "How do you know where I was in June?" "Because in June you held yourself like you were expecting something to hit you at any moment," he said. "You don't do that as much anymore." A pause. "Garrett Cole put a lot of energy into making me feel like I was right to expect that," she said. "I know. And the thing is," She stopped, started again. He's still there. He's repositioning, but he's still on the board and he's still building the next thing. The situation hasn't resolved, it's just paused. I know. So it's not that the threat is gone, it's that She thought about it. I'm less afraid of it than I was, and I'm not sure when that changed. He thought about that. About what had changed for him, in the equivalent way, when the stone behind his sternum had stopped being the main fact of his life, and had become instead a thing he carried without organizing his whole existence around. I think it changes when you have enough things outside the threat that the threat stops being the biggest thing in the room, he said. She looked at him. You built something real, he said. You know it's real now. That's different from knowing it abstractly. He paused. It's the same thing that happened to me with the ranch. Once the math worked, once it was actually real and not just a plan, the fear of it failing changed shape. It was still there, but it wasn't the whole thing anymore. She was quiet for a while. Outside the window, the valley moved past, the dark shapes of the hills, the occasional lit window of a house set back from the road. My father used to say that the difference between a person and a business was that a business could be protected with enough legal structure, she said. People couldn't. People were always going to be exposed. She paused. He meant it as a warning. I think I heard it as a lesson in how to be a business. And now? She looked at the dark. Now I think being exposed is just what being a person is. And you can either spend all your energy trying to armor against it, or you can just live inside it and deal with what comes. That's Roy's version, Ethan said. She almost laughed. That's Roy's version. A pause. Don't tell Roy. He'll be insufferable. He'll already be insufferable. He's been grinning at me all evening. I noticed. She turned back to the window. He thinks this is funny. Roy thinks most things are funny. Is he wrong? Ethan thought about his year. About a Napa Valley vineyard and a midnight blue dress, and a lie he'd told his mother in a panicked moment that had, improbably, found its way here. About this particular thing, not really, he said. Mwasem. October settled in over the valley with the particular beauty of the season, the hills going gold and amber, the morning fog that burned off by midday, the light at a lower angle that made everything look like it was being paid special attention. The ranch was in its post-harvest rhythm, the vegetable operation winding down and the planning for spring already starting, and Ethan found himself doing something he hadn't done since the first year he'd bought the property, thinking about what came next with actual anticipation rather than cautious management of expectation. The grant money had landed in October, and he'd spent 2 weeks with a contractor running new infrastructure on the east side of the property. Proper irrigation, a second storage structure, the groundwork for scaling the spring operation the way the Heirloom Valley Network contract required. Tom from next door had come over to look at it and said, "Well, you're serious about this," with the grudging appreciation of a man who respected commitment. He was serious about it. He'd been serious about it from the beginning. He just needed the resources to match the seriousness, and now he had them, and the thing he'd been building in the abstract was building in the concrete, and those were two different things. Victoria came when she could. Not every weekend. Sometimes it was 10 days between visits, sometimes 2 weeks. She always texted before she came, and she always drove herself. And she always brought something for Lily that was calibrated to whatever Lily was currently interested in, which meant she was paying attention to what Lily was currently interested in, which Lily noticed and did not mention because she was 8 and knew that mentioning it would make it a thing. The thing between Ethan and Victoria did not resolve itself into a clean shape during October. It didn't have a clean shape. It had the shape of two people with genuinely complicated lives finding the form that fit, which looked like imperfect scheduling and occasional miscommunication, and one genuine argument in early October about the infrastructure loan. He'd wanted to restructure the holding company arrangement so the terms were explicit and formal and on paper, and she'd said it was unnecessary, and he'd said it was necessary to him, and she'd said that sounded like pride, and he'd said maybe it was, but it was still necessary, and they'd gone in circles about it for 40 minutes before she said fine, and he said thank you, and neither of them said anything else about it for 2 days until she texted, "Talk to my attorney. The restructured terms are actually cleaner from a liability standpoint anyway, so you were right, don't make it a thing. He'd texted back, making it a thing. She replied, expected. The restructured loan paperwork arrived the following week, and he signed it at the kitchen table and filed it in the folder where he kept important documents. And it was the least romantic thing that had ever happened. And it was also, in some way he couldn't explain, a relief. Like the foundation of something had been poured properly. November arrived. Garrett Cole's next move came in the second week of November, and it was, as Victoria had predicted, different in character from the first campaign. Quieter, more procedural, the move of someone who had learned from the previous failure and adjusted. He proposed a formal CEO performance framework, an annual evaluation structure tied to specific quantitative benchmarks, with board oversight at each stage. It was on its face a reasonable governance proposal. Several boards had similar structures. The trap was in the benchmarks. They were calibrated to short-term metrics that favored rapid scaling over sustainable growth, and the performance triggers for board intervention were set low enough to give the board regular grounds for review. Victoria called Ethan after the proposal was circulated. "He's better than I gave him credit for," she said. "This one is actually smart. Can you amend it?" "I can propose amendments. Whether they pass depends on the 3 votes I don't fully control." She paused. "He's been working those 3 for 2 months. The repositioning, the constructive voice, voting with me on procedurals. It was investment in credibility for exactly this." "What do you do?" "I come with a counterproposal that's better than his," she said. "A performance framework that's actually rigorous, but built around the metrics that matter for this company's model, not his fund's exit timeline." She paused. "I've been working on it since September. I knew something like this was coming. You prepared for it. I told you, he telegraphs." Her voice had the edge it got when she was fully operational. Not cold, just focused in a way that was almost physical. "I have 12 days before the next board meeting. I need to build the argument, and I need to brief the board members individually before they see it in the room." "That's doable." "It's tight." A pause. I won't be able to come up for a few weeks. Maybe until after Thanksgiving." Lily had been looking forward to Victoria being there for Thanksgiving. He knew this not because Lily had said it directly, but because she'd mentioned twice that there was going to be enough food, and that Grandma always made too much, and that maybe they should invite extra people. "I'll tell Lily," he said. "I'm sorry." "Don't be sorry. Handle it. That's what matters." He paused. "Call when you can." "I will." She paused. "Ethan, She stopped. "What?" "Nothing. I'll call." He knew what the stopped sentence was. He'd been carrying a version of it himself for a while. They were both apparently waiting for the right moment to finish it, and neither of them had found the moment yet. And that was fine. Some things moved at their own pace, and it was either arrogance or impatience to force them faster. He told Lily that Victoria had to work through Thanksgiving. Lily received this information standing at the counter eating an apple, and her face did the thing it did when she was arranging her reaction, setting the immediate thing aside to get to what was actually true. "Okay," she said. "She wanted to be here." "I know." Lily took another bite. "Is she okay?" "She's working on something hard, like before." "And she'll fix it?" "Yeah," he said. "She'll fix it." Lily nodded. Then, "Can we send her something for Thanksgiving from us?" He looked at his daughter, who had an uncomplicated understanding of what mattered that he found instructive regularly. "Yeah," he said. "We can do that." They made a box. Lily's idea, executed with the thoroughness she brought to projects that were important to her. She made a card that was mostly drawings of the ranch with everyone labeled, including the chickens, who had individual names that Ethan had not entirely kept track of. She included a drawing of the soccer field with the Jordan counter strategy diagrammed on it. She wrote, on a separate piece of paper in careful printing, "The ranch is better when you're here," from Lily Mercer. Ethan looked at that piece of paper for a moment before Lily put it in the box. He added a small jar of the heirloom tomatoes he'd preserved in September, which he knew Victoria had eaten approximately 6 of, standing at the kitchen counter the Saturday she'd helped him process the harvest, claiming she was taste testing. He sealed the box and mailed it to her San Francisco office because he didn't have a home address, which was a thing he realized for the first time while addressing it, and which felt, suddenly, like something worth fixing. Why? The counter-proposal passed. It passed 14 days after she'd started building it, in a board meeting in the third week of November, with a vote of 6-5. Closer than she'd wanted, she told him, but it passed. The performance framework was hers. The benchmarks were right. Garrett had lost another round, and this time without the dramatic exposure of the shareholder meeting. Just a board vote, quiet and procedural, the kind of win that didn't make news but that changed the ground beneath a conflict. She called him that night from what sounded like a car. 6-5, she said. I heard. I should have had 7, she said. Harrison Briggs, he abstained. Why? He said the framework was good, but he wanted more time to review it. A pause. He'll vote with me next time. He always needs one more meeting than everyone else. I know how he is. She paused. 6-5 is enough. 6-5 is a win. Yes. She sounded tired and clean, the way she sounded after things that had required everything. I got your box. He hadn't mentioned the box. He'd just sent it. Lily made the card, he said. I know. She labeled the chickens. I've been keeping it on my desk. A pause. The tomatoes were gone by Wednesday. I figured. A longer pause. I want to come for Christmas, she said. If you'd want that. We'd want that, he said. It'd be my first Christmas that wasn't... I haven't had a real Christmas in 4 years, she said. Since my father died. I work through it, usually. Come for Christmas, he said. We have a tree that Lily picks every year from the farm up the road, and it's always slightly too large for the living room, and that's part of it. She was quiet for a moment. Okay, she said. Christmas at the ranch was not quiet or clean or particularly organized. Margaret Mercer arrived on Christmas Eve with enough food for 18 people and the energy of someone who had been thinking about this for a month, and Dana came with her husband, who was a quiet, decent man named Paul, who had learned over 7 years of marriage to simply exist alongside the Mercer family noise and find it manageable. Roy came on Christmas morning with a bottle of wine he announced was very good, and that turned out to be adequate. Patricia arrived at noon with her friend, and Lily's school friend Sophie came with her mother, who had apparently resolved her feelings about Victoria enough to accept the invitation. And the small ranch house held 11 people with the specific controlled chaos of a place that was too full and too warm and too loud and exactly right. Victoria arrived Christmas Eve afternoon. She arrived with presents that were precise and well chosen. A book about deep-sea ecosystems for Lily that Lily held with the reverence of someone receiving a sacred object, practical things for Ethan that were useful without being statements, flowers for Margaret that Margaret received with the emotional straightforwardness she brought to everything. And she stood in the middle of the full and noisy house and looked around at it with an expression that was not performed and not measured and not held at distance, just open. The way a face looks when it has arrived somewhere it didn't know it was looking for. Lily took her hand and pulled her into the chaos. Christmas morning, early, before anyone else was up. Ethan on the porch with his coffee and the cold December air, the valley quiet under a sky that was moving from dark to gray. Victoria came out in a jacket she'd borrowed from the hall closet and sat on the step beside him without saying anything. They sat in the cold morning. The valley was still. The stars were still visible at the edges of the sky. My father would have liked you, she said eventually. He looked at her. He liked people who built things, she said. Not for what the things were worth, for the fact that they made them. She looked out at the dark fields. He would have liked the ranch. I'd have liked to meet him, Ethan said. He would have had a lot of opinions about the bean variety. What kind of opinions? The specific, slightly aggravating kind that turned out to be right. She almost smiled. He was like that. Sounds familiar, Ethan said. She looked at him. That's a compliment, he said. She was quiet for a moment, looking at the gray beginning of the sky. I've been thinking about what Lily wrote on that card, she said, that the ranch is better when I'm here. It is. I've been thinking about why that's hard for me to just receive without analyzing it. She paused. I keep wanting to check the claim, verify it somehow. Does it need verifying? She looked at him. No, she said. That's the thing. It doesn't. She said it like someone setting something down that they'd been carrying a long time. Not dramatically, not with relief exactly, just setting it down because they'd decided they were done with the weight of it. He took her hand. She laced her fingers through his the way she always did. Automatic now, practiced, the way things became when they've happened enough times to be a habit. They sat with the cold morning moving around them. I want to figure out the home address thing, he said. She turned to look at him. I sent the box to your office because I didn't have a home address for you, he said. I realized it while I was writing the label. That seemed like something to fix. She looked at him for a long moment. You're asking if you can know where I live. I'm saying you should have a place you put on a form as home, he said. Whether that's San Francisco or here or some combination, I don't know what that looks like for you. He paused. I know what I'd want it to look like. What would you want? He looked out at the ranch, the fields, the equipment shed, the chicken coop that they'd fixed the roof of together, the fence line that was properly wired, the infrastructure that was half built on the east side, all of it still in the gray pre-morning, and all of it real in the way that things were real when you'd built them with your hands and your decisions, and your particular kind of stubbornness. I'd want you to put this on the form, he said, not as an address, as home. She was quiet for a long time, long enough that he didn't try to fill it. That's the biggest thing you've said to me, she said finally. Not frightened, just acknowledging the size of it. I know, he said. I've been working up to it. She looked at him. Her face in the cold morning air, not the board meeting face, not the calibrating face, just her face, which he had learned over 6 months the way you learn a language, not all at once, but until one day you realize you're thinking in it. I'm not going to be easy, she said. I know that about myself. I work too much, and I analyze things that don't need analyzing, and I make unilateral decisions and apologize for them later. I know, he said, and this, she gestured vaguely at the ranch. This life is real, and I need to not treat it like a retreat from my actual life, because it is my actual life. If I'm here, it's my actual life. I know that too, he said. Then yes, she said. He looked at her. Yes, she said again. Put it on the form. This is home. She paused. It's been home since about the 3rd time I came. I just needed to stop testing the claim. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. He tightened his hand around hers and she leaned her shoulder against his, and they sat with the morning coming in over the valley, the gray pulling back from the east to show the first pale line of sun above the hills. Inside the house, Lily woke up. They heard her, footsteps on the floor above, then on the stairs, then the sound of her voice calling, "Is it time?" And Dana's sleepy answer from the guest room that it was absolutely not time yet. It was barely 6. "It's time," Lily announced, with the certainty of someone who has decided. Victoria looked at Ethan. "She's not wrong," she said. "It's Christmas. It's 6 in the morning." "She's 8. 6 in the morning on Christmas is the only correct time." He stood up, pulling her up with him. They went inside, and the house filled with the noise of a family that was not quiet and not clean and not organized, and in the middle of it, Lily found Victoria and took her hand and pulled her toward the tree that was slightly too large for the room, and Ethan stood in the doorway of his own living room and watched the woman he loved. He knew it clearly now, without needing to work up to it anymore, the way you stop working up to things that have simply become true. Standing in the crooked light of a too large Christmas tree with his daughter, and he thought about all the ways this had started. A lie at a wedding, a panic, a stranger at the edge of a vineyard who had turned around with assessing eyes and decided in the space of a breath to say yes. He thought about what you couldn't plan for, about the specific improbability of any good thing and how the good things never arrived through the doors you built for them. They arrived through the gap in the fence you hadn't fixed yet, or through the conversation you hadn't meant to have, or through the moment you were desperate enough to ask a stranger for something and honest enough to tell her exactly why. He thought about Sarah, who had been real and whole and was gone, and who had been the reason he'd built this place, and who was not replaced by anything. not erasable, not required to make room. She was part of what he'd built. She was in the porch railing and the bean rows and in Lily, obviously, in every angle of Lily's face. She was not in competition with what was standing in his living room right now. Life was not a competition between versions of itself. He'd spent 3 years learning that. He didn't know until this moment how fully he'd learned it. Lily looked over at him from across the room. "Dad, come on," she said. "You're missing it." He crossed the room and sat down next to them on the floor, next to the too large tree, next to his daughter, and the woman who had said this was home, and the room filled with the voices of the people who constituted his family, which was broader than blood and stranger than he'd planned, and more real than anything he'd had a hand in building. There is a version of this story that is about a billionaire and a farmer, and that version is not wrong exactly. Those are the facts of it. But the facts of a thing are rarely the thing itself. What it was actually about was simpler and harder than categories. It was about two people who had each spent years behind armor of one kind or another, his built from grief, hers built from exposure, and who had managed, through a combination of improbable circumstance and the particular stubbornness of people who tell each other the truth, to find their way to somewhere real. Victoria Sinclair had spent 4 years running a company with precision and intelligence, and the inherited love of something her father had built. She'd done it from behind a kind of glass, capable, present, never quite touched. What the ranch had given her was not escape, it was contact. The specific experience of being in a life that had dirt on it, that had fence lines that needed two people, that had a child who argued about shark feelings and labeled chickens on Christmas cards and said what she thought without checking whether it was appropriate. A life that was too full and too real, and that wanted her there not for what she could give it, but for what she was. She had not known how much she needed that until she was standing inside it. And Ethan, who had built a thing from grief and stubbornness, and the conviction that if he kept his hands moving he could eventually find solid ground, had found that solid ground was not the point. The ground under his feet was fine. What he'd been missing without quite naming it was someone to share the view with, not to complete him in the way of stories that flatten people into halves. He was complete. He'd done the work of that. But there was a difference between complete and finished, and he had mistaken one for the other for 3 years. Lily knew before either of them. She'd known from the second vineyard encounter in the kitchen at his mother's house, when Victoria had crouched to eye level and treated her like a person worth the effort. Children moved toward the real thing and away from the performed thing with an accuracy that adults mostly unlearn. Lily had not unlearned it yet. Outside the ranch, in the months that followed, things continued in the way that things continue. Garrett Cole remained on the board and made procedural moves that Victoria countered with the patience of someone who had accepted that this was simply the terrain. The IPO process began in the spring on Victoria's timeline, structured the way she wanted, and went forward in the fall with terms that her father would have recognized as sound. The Heirloom Valley contract doubled in volume the following spring, and the county grant funded a third growing season. And Ethan hired 2 people part-time and had the conversation with Dana that yes, the math was actually working now, and Dana said she'd always known it would, which was not entirely true, but was kind. Roy, when he eventually understood what had happened and had processed it through the lens of his own particular wisdom, said, "You met a stranger at a wedding and lied to your mother and it turned into all this?" And Ethan said yes, basically, and Roy shook his head and said, "The Lord works in..." and then caught himself because they'd all agreed no religious references, and finished with, "Mysterious ways. Life does that. I mean life. Life does that." And everyone at the table decided to let it go. Lily, who was 9 by then, and had grown half an inch, and was starting to be genuinely fast on the soccer field, was asked by her teacher in the spring to write an essay about something important she'd learned that year. She wrote about how the best things in her life had started with her dad doing something embarrassing, and how that meant embarrassing things were actually good, and how the bravest thing was not being cool, but being honest even when you weren't ready. Her teacher gave her full marks and wrote in the margin, "This is very wise for your age." Lily showed it to Victoria, who read it and did not say anything for a moment and then said, "She's right. Your dad did something very embarrassing." "I know," Lily said, delighted. "I was there." The morning Ethan sat at the kitchen table in December of the following year, a full year and a half after the Napa Valley wedding, 18 months after a panicked lie, and a stranger in a midnight blue dress, and found himself simply sitting there, coffee in hand, listening to Victoria on a call in the next room, and Lily getting ready upstairs and the chickens making their morning noise outside. He was struck by something that was almost embarrassing in its simplicity. He was happy. Not the managed version, not the functional version, not the version that was okay and fine and getting through. Actually happy in the ordinary domestic specific sense that had nothing to do with circumstance being perfect. Because it wasn't, it was still complicated and ongoing and uncertain in a dozen ways. Just happy the way you are happy when you are where you belong, with the people who are yours, in the life you built. He sat with that for a moment. Didn't analyze it, didn't check the claim. Just let it be what it was. Outside, the December morning was cold and clear, and the fields were bare and waiting for spring, and everything that mattered was inside this house or close enough to find.